Welcome one and all. It's time for arguably the spiciest tournament report of all. Not only does the Dwarven Linehammer continue in its quest to kill the old world, but it's also War for the Riverlands, which is a themed old world event from the TSN arena where each table has a massive river stretching all the way across the middle of the battlefield with various special rules, which I'll go over in a moment. So, I think this one was sold out as well, so I think it's the full 24 players, which is the capacity for the TSN arena. Maybe 22, there might have been a dropout or two. So, let's dive in. You can see immediately from this picture, though, that the Doomseeker, front and centre, so they are the major change from my previous list. The two Doomseekers are now tooled up to the eyeballs with runes. So, let's have a look at my entire army, and then I'll take you through my list. Okay, so let's start with the two Doomseekers, who feature prominently in some of these photos, with a bit of human activity in the background you can see there. So, the two Doomseekers, what do they have? Well, this one right here, which I'm opening up on my list now. So, they don't really have ways of defending themselves, because if they get killed, it's not that big of a deal. We have Master Rune of Alaric the Mad on this one, so its attacks will not allow any armor saves, which is the dream. And Warrior's Rune, Rune of Wrath, and Rune of Endless Battle. So that's +1 weapon skill, +1 attack, and for each unsaved wound caused, which includes unsaved wounds that are saved by regeneration, that will generate 1 extra attack. But it doesn't keep going, you can't keep getting extra attacks like that. We've got Gemmel in the chat already. Good evening. Ready for this spicy trip into the Riverlands. Then the second Doomseeker has a very similar loadout. This one is 5 points cheaper. This one has 3 runes of cleaving, so -3 AP. Also the Warrior's Rune and the Rune of Wrath, so +1 attack, +1 weapon skill. And Rune of the Reckless, so +1 to hit in close combat and +1 to be hit in close combat. Which isn't a big deal, because the Doomseekers just want to kill something and then die. So it's like the dream rune, really. So heavily tooled up, between them they're over 300 points. So if there's an opponent who's able to avoid them for the whole game, and not engage at all, they will just win unless I can get myself killed on dangerous terrain. But with a potential 12-inch charge, it's not that easy to avoid the Doomseekers for an entire game, and if you shoot them, you're not scoring any points. So what else have I got in my list? Let's have a look at the back where we've got some characters. So, we have got a Thane BSB on Shield Bearers with the Master Rune of Grungni and the Rune of Fury on the Great Weapon for some magical attacks in case we come across the Green Knight at some point. We've got the... oh yeah, I've also got a Rune of Battle on this BSB as well. The Machine Gun Thane of Doom with the usual combo, so that he's got the 2 shots that always hit on 3s, and then they each explode into 2d3 hits. And doesn't suffer any negative modifiers when shooting. So, pretty standard in my lists. We've also got a Runesmith who doesn't have any runes of spellbreaking, because what I'm finding is that he's rarely in range to actually use his Dispel anyway. So he's mostly in there just to give the extra Armor Bane and Flaming attacks to one of my units, which is probably going to be the Rangers. So they would be Armor Bane 4 on their crossbows, which is very good at taking down things like Knights with a good save. Then we've got Burlock Daminson, who is the General, Leadership 10, and prevents the unit he's in from suffering -1 to hit at long range. So if you're putting him in a really big unit that's very wide, for example, where lots of them are going to be firing at long range frequently, then you're getting pretty good value out of him for only 85 points. The problem is that if you get into combat, sometimes he kills himself with his hammer, which is funny though. So it's almost worth taking him just for that. We've got 1 Gyrocopter with the steam gun, nice and cheap. And then, in terms of other units, we've got 2 Grudge Throwers with no runes on them at all. And we also have 2 big lines. So, the not quite so big line, which is Iron Drakes, 18 of them with full command, Trollhammer Torpedo, Cinderblast Bombs. Then we've got 31 Rangers, potentially can be set up in one long line. They've got great weapons, crossbows, shields, throwing axes. They do not have a champion, but they do have a Standard Bearer and Musician, and the Standard Bearer has a Rune of Battle. So if the BSB goes in there, that's 31 Rangers with a 5+ ward from the BSB, And they've got a static combat res of 4 for a standard, a battle standard, and then they each have a rune of battle, which do stack. So, that's going to be interesting. And they'll also have a runesmith in there for armor bane and flaming attacks. And depending on whether I'm facing anything ethereal, that will determine where I put some of my other heroes. So, for example, the Gun Thane of Doom has a magical handgun, so is a threat to ethereal units. And the BSB with the big great weapon is a threat to ethereal units. Other than that, the only thing I can threaten them with is combat resolution and the Doom Seekers. So I'm going to be spreading them out to avoid any ethereal onslaughts that I might be facing. At the last event, I mostly faced Dwarves, so I don't feel like it was a true test of the lines. And, oh, Gemmel says, down with Linehammer. GW box art should be replaced with similar formations to set expectations. Yes, by the way, after this video, I am actually going to create a Redbubble t-shirt with Linehammer on it, probably my logo, and some kind of hilarious phrase on the back with a picture of a line on it. So that'll put my merch sales through the roof being like 1 inch off the ground for my merch sales, for the record. So, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so I was mostly facing Dwarves at the last event, so I didn't get a true test against some of the real filth out there for this Linehammer. So, I'm hoping to face some of the things that I'm concerned about to see how it does. So we're talking dragons, and maybe multiple dragons, lots of skirmishing units, so either Skaven or Wood Elves. And what else did I not face too much of? Because when I faced a Mega Death Star of Skinwolves, that caused me lots of problems, and then the Dwarf Death Star of Doom as well, which I was very close to dealing with last time, but ended up being crushed 20-0 because I put all my resources into killing that one thing that I didn't ultimately kill. So we'll see how this one goes. Game 1 is against the Vampire Counts. So we do have some ethereal units. We've also got a Scream from a Terrorgeist, and this is the map. So these are the Riverlands maps. They alternate, so you're going to have the wide layout, and then you're going to have lengthways in rounds 2 and 4. And in those games, the river will be down the other way. So in 3 of the games, we're going to have this really long river. The rules for the rivers: they are dangerous terrain. If you are moving across them, then you might take wounds. If you're shooting over them, it's -1 to hit. You can't use fly moves to go over the rivers, and you can't use swift stride over the rivers. So they give with one hand and take away with the other, as far as gun lines are concerned, because the enemy are going to probably be a bit slower coming towards you, and they may have to wait a bit longer to charge, but also you're -1 to hit over the river as well, because it provides cover. On the other hand, it means that enemies that would normally advance in such a way that they have cover anyway don't get any additional benefit, so they can kind of deploy a bit more freely, because they know they're going to be getting cover from the river anyway. They don't need to wrangle their units in a weird position so that they're giving cover to each other, if that makes sense to anybody. We've got Sean in the chat. Good evening. So I anticipate this being the biggest video ever for the old world. Maybe not. So, Game 1 against the Vampire Counts. I will pull up the list now for my opponent and tell you exactly what we have in there as we go to... Let's find some close-ups of the army. So we've got a Terrorgeist, obviously. We have got some zombies. Small little block of zombies. We've got some Graveguard. And how many is that? Let me check the list to see how many there's supposed to be. We've got in core, it is 20 Graveguard, 20 skeletons, and 26 zombies. So we've got some skeletons there. Is that 20? I think there's some heroes in there as well, so that explains why there's more in that unit. There is also some Spirit Hosts. There are 3 of those. 5 Blood Knights. Now, when I see Blood Knights, I think that's one thing that's a significant amount of points that I can kill quite well. Because my list, crossbows and Drake guns, pretty good at killing 1 wound, high armoured stuff, because I've got good armour bane. Some AP rolled in naturally to the Drake guns, for example. The Torpedo, the Gun Thane, they would like to shoot at things like this all day, if possible. But there's not only these units, we've also got the Terrorgeist, of course, and we've got some heroes lurking around the place. So there's a vampire count on a zombie dragon who is actually hiding down here, represented by, I think this is one of the new Age of Sigmar half bat, half vampire people. So that has Talisman of Protection, Law Familiar, Master of the Black Arts, the Illusion spell, Law. So we're going to have some good saves on that. So I'm not too confident in killing a vampire. We've got a Master Necromancer who is hanging out in this unit, I think. I think that's the Necromancer there with a bird. And the Master Necromancer is level 4, who is the General, has the spell Familiar, because obviously people just want to squeeze the most out of their wizards. They don't want to leave anything to chance. There is also a White Lord who is down here. That's the BSB, who doesn't really have anything too fancy except a war banner. And that is the lot. So, let's go back to the wide shot. Oh, by the way, one thing I haven't mentioned, the river in each round has one special rule across the whole game, and that changes going into round 2, and then a different one in 3 and 4, and so on. So for this one, if you're in the river at the end of a move, then it gives you strength 4 hits onto your unit. Any models, I think, take a strength 4 hit. So that's interesting, especially if the enemy are going to be advancing on me with slow units that might have to get stuck in the river. So some of them might die from that. On the other hand, though, undead can just keep bringing models back to life anyway. So we'll see if they even want to advance thoroughly towards my lines. You also, if you have more models within, I think it's 3 inches of the river at the end of the game, you score 200 victory points. So it's a little bit like Command and Control, but it's an entire board length. So if you've got a lot of bodies on it, you can get those extra bonus points. I'm not going to be gunning for that too much, because that means I'm deploying forwards, which is going to leave space for things like flyers to land behind me. So I don't want to leave spaces for that. We've got Rangers on a hill. So here's something interesting, actually, which I didn't discover until game 2, I think. So in the rules, the way it's written is that this unit of Rangers, because they're not entirely on the hill, they can't draw line of sight over a unit onto another unit. Even the ones that are on a hill can't do that. It's not on a model by model basis. You have to be entirely on the hill in order for you to draw a line of sight from a model on a hill over the top of another unit to a unit behind them, which is really weird. And if anyone can see anything in the rules that contradicts that, let me know. But several of us were going through it and having a look at that, and it seems to be the way it works. Very weird. No game has ever got terrain rules perfect. It's always a total mess. So we've got a line of Rangers, some of them on the hill, so they can fire in 2 ranks. Then we've got the Iron Drakes, who are partly in this dangerous terrain. You might think that's an odd choice, but I'm not planning on moving. I just want the enemy to walk towards my guns and die, is the dream. I've got the Thane BSB with the magic weapon in with the Iron Drakes in this one. So I'm not worried about shooting damage, so I don't particularly need a ward save on the Rangers. And I've got the Runesmith in there anyway, and so for magic, there'll be magic resistance 2 for his presence. Got a Doomseeker there, and the one there. They're just going to go straight towards the enemy. They either get killed, or they run into the river, or run at the enemy. Either way, they're going to get something accomplished, either killing themselves or killing some of the enemy. Grudge Throwers just spaced out. This Undead Force doesn't look like it's particularly built for spreading out. Maybe the Terrorgeist could go around the flank, possibly, and then go after the Grudge Thrower from there, but I don't know whether it wants to. It might be better served like trying to scream some of my dudes to death, if that's what it wants to do. We've got Giovanni in the chat. Good evening. And we've got Matt. Yes, who says, unit that is entirely on a hill. Odd, but how it is. Yep, so it's very weird, and I would say stupid. I'd go that strong into how that rule works. I'd also say that the way the rules are written that allows Linehammer is also stupid, by the way. For anyone that's not seen any of my tournament reports in the past, while using Linehammer, I do admit that it makes the game look stupid and it shouldn't be in there. So they should limit it to a number of attacks that you can get either side of the base contact models. However, you can't do that without completely revamping infantry at the same time, because otherwise some units become totally useless, I think. It's still kind of viable for a gun line, but if you're not getting loads of supporting attacks, then it kind of falls down a bit with things like Rangers, who are paying a lot of points for the ability to hit with their great weapons from 5 feet away, all the way across the table. But yeah, they should totally get rid of that and give infantry a different role in the game other than just fighting things, because as it stands, they don't really have anything to do because they're just bad at the moment. They get charged, they die, they lose their front rank, and if you're not super wide, you just don't get to attack back. And if you make it a Mega Death Star, load it up with heroes, that's another thing I don't think the game should be encouraging either. I think we should be encouraging a lot of diverse units, not just Death Stars and points denial. But the idea is that this list isn't going to give away points. Because obviously it's the old world, the only way to score points other than holding the river is by killing enemy units, and in this list, what are you going to kill? If you kill the Doomseekers, you don't score anything. You kill a Gyrocopter maybe, if it goes near you, and you might kill some Grudge Throwers. If you kill one of these big units, then you deserve your points, because that's going to be quite tricky with the stand and shoot, and particularly the Rangers are good in combat as well, and the heroes I've got in there are quite good. So if you kill one of these units, you deserve your win, I think. Other than that, anyone that walks towards me will be shot. So, let's go on and see how this game starts then. So my opponent wins the roll and goes first. And you can see with my Vanguard moves, the Doomseekers have just moved towards the enemy, and the Gyrocopter up a little bit as well. Terrorgeist moves up to behind the river, and is going to try and scream at me. Then, just a full-on advance, and a Doomseeker is killed by magic spells immediately, which is fine by me because they don't give away victory points. So that Doomseeker is dead. And you can see we've got a Vortex down there as well. And I can't remember what that one is, but it's not Pillar of Fire because there is no Pillar of Fire in this list, and that's the only Vortex I really care about. None of the others are that impactful. I think this one's going to block my line of sight, but it won't move. So certain models won't be able to shoot. You can see, by the way, I've got my General in with the Rangers, so they're not -1 to hit at long range. I've got my BSB in with the Iron Drakes to give them the ward save, and I've got those characters kind of on the end so that they can also affect the other unit with their buffs. So the General's inspiring leadership, and we've got the BSB giving a residual 6+ ward onto this unit in the shooting phase as well. The Runesmith right there, I don't think he's going to be able to dispel much unless the Necromancer comes really close, which he probably won't. So, this Vampire and a Zombie Dragon is lurking in my flank. I want to make sure I don't get flank charged into the Rangers. That would be a bad time, so I have to defend against that. Lots of Graveguard die from walking through this forest, which is quite funny. And onto my turn 1. So, the Gyrocopter just heads up to the river. By the way, the Gyrocopter cannot physically cross this river. I forgot to mention that. Because going through there will reduce your movement by 1, and you can't fly over the river at this event. So it'll go down to movement 0 when it touches the river. So you could fly in there and touch it and then not move at all, I think. I could charge over it with movement 0 because I do have Swift Stride. So if the enemy's really close, I could actually charge to the other side and then never be able to get back again. Doomseeker and the Gyrocopter are just positioning themselves so that they can be an annoyance. You can see I've shot down 2 Blood Knights as well. And one of the Grudge Throwers misfires and is now facing the wrong way. So it can't shoot next turn either. Gemmel says it'll be interesting to see what they do to address the infantry problem. If they think it's a problem, I assume what they imagine the game, it wasn't with a 4-foot line of dwarves. I don't think they envisage that. But some things that are clearly a problem in the game, they have no issue with, such as the dragons with the triple saves. They have no problem with that whatsoever. I think the issue with the old world could be mostly fixed with the scoring system, because that's why infantry are useless, because purely for fighting, they never get the charge in against the enemy because they're slow and they don't have things like Swift Stride, which is all on top of the already faster units, get even more speed, and they get their front rank wiped out, because there's no step up from the second rank in this edition. So, if you want to keep those rules the same, you have to change the scoring so that infantry can kind of put an anvil down in an area and control that for victory point purposes. That would give them a purpose. And then, with that, you could then limit the lines, I think. So, the Terrorgeist takes a wound as well, I think from the Trollhammer Torpedo. I don't think it successfully screamed any of my guys off in the last turn, by the way. I rolled low enough on the test. And with my other shooting, 2 dead Blood Knights. But as it turns out, 2 dead Blood Knights can just pop up again if they feel like it, if the Necromancer passes a leadership test. Which is mildly annoying, but also means that the ability can't just be passed around to certain other units that might want to have their models brought back as well. But really you have to go all in and kill things, otherwise they just pop up again. So, here's the reason I've put the Gyrocopter here, and the Doomseeker. If the Vampire and Zombie Dragon charges them, there is a theoretical overrun into my Rangers. However, when you're going through the river, you can't use Swift Stride, and you can't fly, and you're going to be -1 on your movement. So, without Swift Stride, it would be difficult for an overrun to then reach my Rangers. So that's my thinking with going right next to the river like that. So that when there's an overrun, it won't reach them without the Swift Stride. That's my plan. Obviously, you could just roll a 6/6 and get there anyway. Turn 2 for the disgusting vampire counts. And you can see everything's back up to full strength now. And there's a fresh unit of zombies that have been raised in front of my Rangers. And there is some logic behind this. So, if you want to charge into the Rangers and you also charge in with zombies, if it's a big unit, I think that's a terrible idea, because they will just give away combat res. If it's a tiny unit that isn't going to be giving away too much combat resolution, I think that's okay, because if I stand and shoot them, sure, I get the points, but it means I'm not standing and shooting against your much better unit. If they make it in, then that'll mean that certain Rangers have to attack the zombies, and they can't put their attacks into your better unit. So it does give me a dilemma. You just don't want to go in with a really big unit of zombies, because I would stand and shoot, kill loads of them, and just give me loads of combat res that you can't get back, and then whatever else goes in would just crumble to death. Jack, who was at the event, says Rivers really offered a different tactical aspect to think about. They definitely did. And my thoughts on it would be that the enemy are going to be slower coming towards the gun line, but it's also harder for me to shoot at them as they approach. So I think it kind of evens out. And obviously, if I'm standing back, the enemy are more likely to score the river, which is just 200 points for free without doing anything. So, we've got 2 charges into the Doomseeker, the Blood Knights and the Vampire. Ignoring the gyro, because that would probably just flee anyway. And in fact it does, and that's why the charge was redirected into the Doomseeker from the Zombie Dragon. So the Zombie Dragon reaches the Doomseeker, the Blood Knights fail their charge, because going through this terrain, they're reduced movement, and it's difficult terrain, so they have to use the lowest dice and can't use Swift Stride, so charging across the river is not an easy feat. So they fail their charge. So at the end of the turn, they're going to take some Strength 4 hits as well. And I think it's with AP 1. The Skeletons move across the river and take loads of wounds from the difficult terrain. The Graveguard take a few as well. And the Terrorgeist has a go at screaming. It doesn't do anything this time. I think last time it maybe didn't scream because it was too far away, or it marched or something. This time it just fails. So, does anything get killed after that? Well, the Doomseeker gets killed by the Vampire, so no victory points for the Doomseeker, and then it overruns and finishes about half an inch away from the Rangers, which is very lucky, because if it had got into them, that means I don't get a stand and shoot, and then they could not worry about that as a problem at all. Maybe throw the zombies in so that I can't put that many attacks into the Vampire, and then hope that the Vampire can do enough to counteract the fact the zombies will get killed by great axes. So that is an option. And obviously I would get, it's my turn next, so there's probably be a challenge against the Vampire, because if I don't issue one, the Vampire probably would, to avoid being hit with all these great axes. And if I refused it, they'd be able to send like the Runesmith maybe, or my General to the back, because I do have a back rank, but that would reduce my leadership or get rid of my Armor Bane. So that's not ideal, so I probably would have to refuse it, because I would want the attacks back, rather than losing a character, not being able to fight back, and taking massive combat res. Turn 2 for me. So you can see, I've shot up the Graveguard nicely with my Iron Drakes. The Rangers opt not to charge the Vampire. Instead, I do some shooting, I think. And the Gyrocopter does actually put its flame template, just for a laugh, on the dragon. And the Grudge Thrower turns around. I'm trying to drop rocks on units as well. lots of shooting going in, and I've done big damage to these units and totally killed the Blood Knights with the Rangers as well. So that's really good. So Blood Knights are gone. They ain't coming back. Let's see. Oh, we've got Jugs the podcast commenting, who says, and were the rivers good? The rivers were definitely a fun addition to the game, is going to be my verdict. Spoiler alert. And where did the knights go? They decided that they didn't like being shot by crossbows, so they withered and died, turned into dust. So Blood Knights, crossbowed to death. And that's pretty much the turn. So what's going to happen next? So, this is a tricky one for the vampire counts. Do you go all in and charge here? What do you charge with? Because you're in the front of everything. You've got nothing in the flank. If you throw in an ethereal unit, that means certain rangers would be stuck attacking the ethereal unit. And they could not do damage that way. So, if you charge in the vampire and the spirit hosts together on their own, I think that would be quite difficult for me to deal with. Because a lot of the rangers, the closest thing to them would be the spirit hosts, and I can't hurt them. Now, if you send anything else in as well, that gives me the opportunity to stand and shoot to build up my combat res, and it also gives me something else to punch for combat res as well. So I think maybe the best thing to do here would be to send in the vampire and the spirit hosts. It's not without risk though, because that's quite far away. They could definitely fail that charge, the spirit hosts, which would leave you with just the vampire in there, and that's the thing I would have to stand and shoot against. So I would get quite a few throwing axes in there with a potential armor bane, so I could do some damage to it. Yeah, so it's a tricky one. And what would you do about the Iron Drakes? Would you charge? You wouldn't charge a Terrorgeist in there, surely. That would be madness, because you would get a torpedo and you'd get all these Drake guns to the face. So that would be maybe unwise, unless you're going in with another unit. But even then, stand and shoot is so good. It's a tough one. So let's see what they do. Well, I thought I'd get a little close-up of this banner, actually. I thought that was cool. It's a very nicely painted Vampire Counts army. There we go. So, no charging yet. That's what it looks like to me, but we'll find out in a moment. So the zombies grow because this is a fresh zombie unit that was raised with the Raised Dead spell can actually be swelled up beyond their starting size. I think there is a limit on how big the raised unit can become, though. We have got Becky in the chat. Let's go Linehammer. Hashtag Linehammer. Hashtag killing the old world one line at a time. That's quite a long hashtag, though, so I might ditch that one. Okay, and then another close-up of the banner. You can tell I like this banner. And that it looks like freehand to me as well. So that's very cool. So we've got charges going in. All the charges. Skeletons going in as well. And the zombies get killed by the stand and shoot. The skeletons don't make the charge. Terrorgeist is just getting in position to do more screaming, I think. The zombies there are moving up. The Graveguard are moving up. Ready so that when they charge, they can all go in at once and not fail their charges. The spirit hosts don't make it in. And you can see I killed well, how many zombies was it? Like 7. Killed them with stand and shoots. That gives me some nice combat res already, which is kind of the nightmare for the vampire. So you have to beat me by quite a lot now before you lose the combat. Vampires do have to lose by, I think it's 3 before they actually take any extra damage, though. So you can see I've already built up 6, it is there, with my combat resolution tracker. Old school. Screaming into the Iron Drakes and not doing a huge amount. How many have I got left in the unit here? So, got 9, 15. So 3 of them have been killed so far, which I can live with. There we go. Should have just gone to the next slide. So you can see that both the Doomseekers are dead at this point. They've both been spelled off the table. One was spelled off, one was killed by the vampire earlier. So, let's keep rolling and get to the juicy combat. So, actually, yeah, I think I've skipped ahead quite a bit here. Because as you can see, oh, actually, no. These are, I think they're reserve moves that the undead have. So that's why all the units are able to get close now. Because if they want to multi-charge, they want to do it and not fail any of them. So all these units together are going to burst in next turn. So I can't remember the name of the spell that lets them reserve move, but it goes off to a sufficient degree that it allows all the nearby units to do it. We've got Perfidy in the chat. Good evening. So, final combat res against the vampire. I end up winning by 1 because I do have Rune of Battle on this unit and a standard bearer, even though I didn't do any damage to the vampire. So the vampire backs away, gives ground, so they're all perfectly aligned. I then fail my restrain on a double 6. So I have to overrun, which brings me into contact with all 4 of these units at once. I don't know how I feel about that. I would rather stand off and shoot them and then get a stand and shoot when they attack me. But I can't do anything about it now. I'm in combat with 4 units. Not necessarily the worst thing. I prefer this than if I was just in combat with the spirit hosts and the vampire. I think if these 2 units were an inch further back, I think that would be much more terrifying because I can rack up some good combat resolution killing skeletons. I can't rack up combat resolution killing spirit hosts. So I think the fact that these 2 are level with them gives me actually more chance of winning the combat. It also gives the Iron Drakes a dilemma. Do they join in and fight? Or do they stand there and shoot something? The only thing they can shoot is zombies, really. So I think charging in might be the way to go, and I can get my Thane involved in the fight and just make it one big line where everything's in combat at once. Matt says, pretty clever setup there if it was intentional. So I think it was intentional that if I overrun, I would go into contact with all the units. I'm suggesting that it might have been stronger if these 2 units weren't involved as well. Nisgard says, random fact, in my country, Denmark, Linehammer is the name that some people have. Same goes for Runesmith. Not kidding. Linehammer is a name that some people have. So there are people named Linehammer. If I ever do a full-on Linehammer convention where all the people who like to play lines all get together in a secret location so that nobody causes an incident and finds out where we are and protests it, then I can invite all the people who are named Linehammer as well. It is a beautiful sight. So, into my turn. The gyrocopter charges into the flank of the vampire, so hopefully I can get a bonus point there. The Iron Drakes charged in as well, and they were just short of touching the Terrorgeist, so the Terrorgeist wasn't quite level with the rest of them. And everyone's fighting. The Iron Drakes were considering not going in because they were going to possibly drag the Terrorgeist in, but we checked it out and they were not quite up to the Terrorgeist. So you can see that a wound has actually been dished out to the Spirit Host because of combat resolution. So look at this. I've gone off the end of the scale for combat res. I've got 9 plus 12. And my opponent has got 9 and then plus another 8. So I do win, so some of the units do take extra casualties. So I was able to put lots of attacks into the skeletons, do a lot of damage to them, and the zombies. And because all the units are fighting each other, this is all considered one massive combat, which is really weird, really complicated. And it's not really the position you want to be in as vampire counts, because this vampire, any loss of combat is also going to chip away damage on him. So if I end up winning combats by a huge amount, everything dies at once. Okay, so as a result of that, we've got some giving ground because these units are obviously unbreakable, but they do take some damage. And I restrain. And the reason I do that is because if the enemies want to charge back into me, I can then stand and shoot them, which will give me some nice extra combat res. So, turn 4, and there's going to be some models come back to life from the Necromancer as well, though, assuming he gets his ability off. It's not a spell. So loads of charges going in. I can stand and shoot with the Iron Drakes at point blank range, and the throwing axes of the Rangers, and also the Machine Gun Thane of Doom is quick shot as well, so he can stand and shoot. So how many zombies is that? Loads of them die from stand and shoot. I specifically target them because I just want to build up massive combat res. The Rangers kill a load of skeletons. Let's see how many there were. There was a few more at least. So kill some skeletons. So I'm already up to 16 combat resolution before the fighting's even started, just because of the stand and shoot, which is hilarious. Let's see. Matt says, the units in the forest wouldn't give ground next time, as when you hit terrain you stop and they're already in terrain. Is that not if you just hit like a blocking piece of terrain? Because the forest is only considered difficult. So would you actually stop when you touch that as well? Can you not give ground in difficult terrain? So if you're already in the forest, can you continue through the forest? Or is it only if you're in front of it you can't then enter the forest with a give ground? Because that would throw up some interesting situations. So, the gyrocopter gets killed this time, but with the massive amount of combat resolution I'm going to have here, I'm not overly concerned, and I'm going to sneeze. It was 3 sneezes, in fact. Yes. Yes, Jack, it is interesting. It says if you come into contact with terrain, but what if you're already in contact? Yes, exactly. So that's an interesting dilemma. So here's the final combat res. So the enemy actually do kill quite a few of my models, but with the wounds I do back, and with the massive combat resolution from stand and shoot, it's just an enormous discrepancy that leads to everything dying. Nearly all the enemy units are wiped out. The vampire's dead, the terrorgeist's dead, the spirit hosts are almost dead, I think. Or maybe dead as well. The skeletons and the graveguard are dead. And then in the final turn, because we're in a bit of a rush, there aren't really any photos of the last bit, so we just rolled the important stuff because there's barely anything left alive. So I charged the necromancer, killed the necromancer, got the river, and shot I think the spirit hosts were still alive, maybe on a wound, shot them with the magic handgun. So it was bad times for the vampire counts. So what do we learn from this one? If you've got very expensive vampire characters, I would think twice about also sending in skeletons and zombies. I would not think twice at all about sending in spirit hosts, because you can kind of block off half the line from hitting your vampire if you go in like this and the line stretches all the way down there, because the closest unit is the spirit hosts. So I'm putting loads of wasted attacks into an ethereal unit. On the subject of ethereal units, by the way, idea I had today, Rune Lords, horribly overcosted. I'm talking Rune Lords on foot, not the Rune... Is it Rune Master with the Anvil of Doom? Just Rune Lords. They're like twice the price of a Runesmith and barely give you anything extra. I was thinking, what if Rune Lords gave a unit magical attacks, in addition to flaming attacks and armor bane? I think that would justify the cost of a Rune Lord, actually. And I think that would make people take them. So if anyone's got any thoughts on that, if you think that's going to be overpowered, giving a whole unit magical attacks, let me know. Matt says, yeah, it's an odd one, but as soon as you go with the give ground, you come into contact with terrain as they're already in it, so don't give ground. Interesting. Very interesting indeed. Okay, next round, we have lengthways battle with a smaller river, like so. And this is the terrain layout we end up with. What do we have here? Well, we have the rematch of the century. At the last event, you may recall, I played against my fellow Dwarven YouTube legend, who is Richie of Dowie After Dark YouTube channel, and he wins a lot of events. So he's kind of the anomaly in the Dwarven community. Other than just taking good lists, which he obviously takes good, strong points denial lists, he's also just an old world beast and just knows the rules inside out and plays very well. And has probably played a billion games and is just very good at the game. So I don't think we should look at him winning events as any kind of evidence that dwarves are strong. I think in the hands of your average player, I think dwarves are still poor. So, what has he brought this time? And what lessons have I learned from our last game? He's actually brought a very similar list to last time with a couple of changes, which I'm going to find on the app right here. as I pull up the list. Let me see. There we go. So, very similar. We've still got an anvil, which is toughness 10. We've still got a runesmith BSB, because it's royal clans, so you can do that. Let's see if I've got some better pictures of them. So, there we go. So we've got one grudge thrower, 18 iron drakes, the same as my unit, really. Same as my iron drakes. Except these ones are drilled, which might come up, but it just costs you a few more points. Pony cart for the extra speed for this this marching column of Longbeards. 25 of them, which is slightly less than last time. So they're drilled. They have a champion. They have the Master Rune of Calm, which is useless in this game. That just affects magic. They have the Stroller's Rune to get that little move at the start of the game. And Rune of Battle, Rune of Courage. So they won't run away from terror-causing units, for instance. +1 combat res. And they're joined by a... Let's see. So the BSB has a Rune of Grungni and Rune of Battle. So same as my BSB, except this one's on a Runesmith, who also has 3 runes of spell breaking, which is obviously going to do nothing in this game. And the King. So there's a King on Shield Bearers with Rune of Smiting, Gromril, Preservation, and Passage. So Rune of Passage, very important on these maps because there's this big line of difficult terrain down the middle of the table, so you don't want to be taking all those wounds when you go through it. We've got Bad Squiddo Games in the chat, who is outraged at the lines. Yeah, dwarves killing each other. It happens, though, because there's quite a few people playing dwarves at the moment. At the last event, 3 out of my 5 games were dwarf civil wars. And there was about 4 dwarf players at this event, so theoretically I could have even more dwarf civil wars after this, so we'll see if that comes up. Monster Helmet says, the hill thing is correct, I know I'm late. Yes, hills, very strange the way it works. They should probably just rewrite the terrain rules and put out what they think the new rules are going to be to the public so that people can see what's broken about them and then tell them, yeah, this is weird, fix that, and then go away, do it again until everyone is happy with it. That could take about 10 years, but we'll get there eventually, at which point there'll be a new edition of the game and they'll get it wrong again. So, these Longbeards... Oh yeah, the King, his runes. So, he does d6 wounds instead of just 1. He's got a 2-up save. He's got a ward save, because the Rune of Grungni is in there as well. And he's just a bit of a beast. The Longbeards are pretty scary. So that is quite a Death Star with a King who's very killy in there. So what they're going to do, they're going to be in marching columns, so they can move triple speed early in the game. The Anvil can then convey them to move again. They can use Drill to then go wider and move a bit so they're in front of you, but they're wide enough to actually fight the next turn. And the idea is they're going to propel themselves, and I have to put my strong units down first because I've got barely any drops in this army. My opponent's got, let's see, maybe similar to mine actually. So it depends who gets to put one of their units down first. So I've gone for, because I can't flee and die off the edge of the table because it's the pass. So the 2 long edges, you can't leave the table on those edges. So you're safe, you would just then turn and start running towards the only edges that you can leave by. So, what I've learned from last time, against a list very similar to this, is to support each unit. Each of my mega lines support the other one, so that when the Death Star gets into one, I can countercharge with another. So obviously, the Death Star is aimed so that it can launch itself directly into this corner as far away from my fighting unit as possible and try and fight the Iron Drakes. So my plan is going to be to move the Iron Drakes up and make it as short a distance between them and the Death Star as possible. Now, I could have put units on the hill, but that would have brought me closer to the enemy, and I am not too keen on doing that. Also, this is when we were just finding out about the hill rules, and the way I understood it at this point was that if you're on the edge of a hill, because the hills aren't technically supposed to be flat, there's something in there about the middle of the hill being higher, and it was just too complicated, and I decided just not to go on the hill at all, because if I was on the back of the hill, I didn't think the models on it would then be able to see over the hill, because technically it's supposed to be bigger. But in all the future games, we just decided to just treat them as flat. So I think that's what I'm going to try and do going forward, because the hills are just a nonsense. So we've got one line of Iron Drakes, and the Rangers are not in a line really at all, because there's not much space, and yeah, they're in two almost equal lines at once, which is total madness and undermining the entire point of Linehammer, breaking the spirit of Linehammer. The two grudge throwers hiding behind this terrain, so the enemy grudge thrower can't have a direct hit on them. So on average, mine, two of them firing at one, I should win that fight. They should hit each other eventually. Then I've got Gyrocopter just hiding behind the woods because it doesn't want to be shot. Doomseeker's just heading out in front, obviously, because they want to die. So, look how far forward they are already. Turn 1. Gemmel says, game is auto-lost used no Linehammer. Yeah, kind of, but I also auto-win the game due to being the Dwarf army with the Goblin green bases. So, it's kind of a win before we start on that basis as well. Let's see. I am Bo Paints. Do you have our game VC player from first round? Yes, if you're rewinding, you can see that game. Welcome, by the way. So, first turn goes to the enemy, the evil dwarves, if you will. And they're going to be flying forward as fast as they can. Hold on, did I just lie? Did I actually go first? Yeah, I think I did. So I skipped by that for some reason. So I went first, didn't achieve much, but moved my Doomseekers closer. There's nothing else in shooting range because I'm staying away from this Death Star. Then in the enemy turn, the Death Star moves forwards as far as possible, but is slower due to the terrain. Actually, no, move through cover, I think, prevents you suffering the -1 to your move. But the Anvil fails to convey them, which is the spell I always fail with the Anvil as well. I think it needs a 10, so you need to roll 7 on 2 dice, which on average you should do it more often than not, but it always seems to fail when I do it. So they're now ripe for the plucking, so I'm going to be able to shoot them with a reasonable amount of stuff. But because of my confusion over hills, probably less Iron Drakes than maybe should be able to shoot them. But I also don't want to move forward anyway, because I'd be cutting down my angle for the Rangers to get in. So the Rangers are going to try and move along this line here, so that if the Death Star goes into the Iron Drakes, I can then flank charge them. That is the dream. So in my turn 2, the Doomseeker making his way towards the enemy Iron Drakes, and the Rangers move a bit, reposition themselves, and my shooting from the Iron Drakes actually whittles down quite a few of the Longbeards, so I'm quite happy with that as a start. And, oh, by the way, the river in this round, I can't remember what it does, but it doesn't do strength 4 hits to you anymore. It might give you extra initiative if you're in the river, something like that. There's various bonuses you get in each round based on the river. So, let's see. Gemmel says, I'm surprised you didn't bunker behind the river for 6 turns and try and win by 300 point bonus. Well, I don't know. So with the Rangers, obviously, because I can scout deploy them, I can put them in a long line right in front of the river. The problem with that is that I don't think my Rangers beat the unwhittled Death Star. I think I have to do good damage to that unit before we start fighting, because they're Longbeards who are superior, and they have great weapons as well. They're higher strength, higher weapon skill, I think. So I think I would lose that fight if I fight them before they're whittled down. Let's see. Oh, that comment was to the Vampire Counts player in Game 1. Well, technically, what I said is still valid. It's all going off in the chat here. Okay, turn 2 for the Evil Dwarves. So, we have actually got Iron Drakes fighting a Doomseeker. Now, the reason for this is not because they want to die, it's because they want to overrun beyond the Doomseeker and thus move further. Because, as it stands, they could only move like to here and then they would stop. With a charge, you can fight and then overrun and get further. They might lose some models in the terrain, potentially, but they can live with that, apparently. So, the Death Star moves towards my line, so I've got one more round of shooting before they're charging. The Anvil does not convey them again, though, so they're not going to be able to go wider. The Iron Drakes, they lose a few, but they do kill the Doomseeker and overrun, so the Doomseeker's done its job. Now, I'm wary of this line now, because if I'm swinging round to get to the flank of the Longbeards, I may leave myself exposed to a flank attack from Iron Drakes, or even them just moving up and blocking me would be annoying as well. So I'm going to have to be careful. So the Rangers have got one more turn that they're going to reposition themselves. So they have to do a small amount of wheeling, probably a couple of inches to get to a slightly better angle, and then start moving this way, just so that they're within charge range and a threat to the enemy Death Star when it gets to here. Now obviously my opponent is a very good player and has ways of wrangling the situation to make it more difficult. So if you get into just a technical who can do what with drilled and who can create what angles against an opponent like this, more often than not you're going to come out on the losing side, but you're also going to learn what things can do and what you can do as well. So Grudge Throwers turn round and fail utterly in this turn. They were trying to shoot at the Death Star because I've got one round to try and whittle them down before we start combat. So nothing from them. The Iron Drakes and the Gunthane clear off a few more though, so that's good. And the Rangers get up to here. So the Death Star will charge the Iron Drakes. They'll go wider to do it. They will beat the Iron Drakes in combat. The Iron Drakes are stubborn, so I could just choose to fall back in good order, which won't take me off the table. It'll probably take me like over here, because they can't run off this table edge because it's the pass, so they can only run off that table edge. So they fall back to over here somewhere. The enemy could then overrun, and potentially the Iron Drakes could then block my own Rangers, depending on the exact situation. It's a very weird setup. If I fall back far enough, they could go through them. If I give ground, because I pass my leadership test sufficiently, then I could just stop where I am, because you can't give ground against the edge of the pass. You would just hit it and stop, which would be the dream, because that means that I could then charge into the flank of the Death Star. So it depends how much I lose combat by, because I do have a stand and shoot, which is not going to be pretty, because there's going to be a Cinderblast bomb going in there as well. So turn 3. Oh, by the way, you can see also that I parked my gyrocopter in front of the Iron Drakes. This isn't to stop them like charging me and overrunning, which they can do. This is to stop them shooting up my Rangers, because I want the enemy whittled. I don't want to be whittled, and they could move up 3 inches and shoot me quite handily from there, I think. So I want to stop them being able to move into the woods and shoot. If they shoot me now, there's not many of them that are going to have good shots there. So I'd rather they just kill the gyrocopter, and I could even flee with the gyrocopter potentially, but the issue with that is that I might get stuck in front of my own unit and stop myself moving forwards, so I probably don't want to flee. So I accept getting charged. The Death Star goes wide and goes into the front of the Iron Drakes. Combat, I managed to kill 5 with stand and shoot, which is great. And then when we get into the actual fighting, let's see. So we've got a challenge going on. The Iron Drake champion versus the Longbeard champion. And so you may notice the Iron Drakes are gone. This is by choice, kind of. So I lost the combat by 4. I rolled my leadership and I got the fall back in good order result, because I did not want to fall back in good order. So if I fall back in good order, I either stop here and block my own unit doing the charge, or I go beyond them. The enemy can then follow me and get out of my charge arc. So I decide I'm not going to use stubborn. I'm going to try and roll a 5 or less, and I've got 2 goes at it because my BSB is right here, to give ground, which would leave them primed to be flank charged. However, the risk with that is that I could just utterly fail the leadership test and flee, which on average takes me through my own unit over here somewhere and doesn't get killed. But that's still not great. The ideal is to just roll a 5 or less on 1 of 2 attempts. I don't know the exact odds for pulling that off, but I think it's worth it, because if I lose the Iron Drakes and then manage to kill this unit as a result, that means I just win the game, I think. So I'll take those odds. So I make the first leadership test. I rolled a 7, which would have been a fallback in good order. So I would have lived, but I decided I would try and re-roll it and try and get a 5 or less for give ground. I then rolled an 11, fled away, I think it was 2 or 3 inches, and then got caught and killed. But because of that, this unit then stops, and they are now in my charge arc. So I can now hit them in the flank, and fun times ahead. So the Iron Drakes have basically sacrificed themselves intentionally so that I can try and kill this Death Star, which has been heavily whittled down already, and then maybe win the game. Let's see. So Gemmel says, do you not need a 20-inch wheel to align a charge there? Well, the wheel can't cause you to fail a charge. So all I have to do is wheel sufficiently so that this guy can touch this guy. So he only needs to change his angle a tiny amount. So I would have enough inches to do it, and maybe if I rolled a double 1 they wouldn't make it. But if we go back to a wide shot here, so to open up the angle for him to touch, they don't have to actually wheel that far. So I just have to touch, and then they would swing round, and then that can't cause you to fail a charge, that bit of it, the closing the door. So just a contact would be enough. So I think I've got my angle just about right there. But we've still got one more combat. The gyrocopter loses to the Iron Drakes, flees, and they pursue. So this complicates matters, because when I swing round now to try and close the door, would I potentially hit the gyrocopter? Would I potentially hit the Iron Drakes? Let's find out. So, turn 4 for me. And the way we figured it was that I would miss my gyrocopter and hit the Iron Drakes, which means that I then go into combat with both units, which is okay, but it's not ideal because I'm also facing another unit, some of which I will have to attack with my axes, which is okay because I could whittle them down, but I would rather be putting more attacks into the Longbeards. So as a result of that, I end up... let's see. So I end up just about losing combat here, which is sad, but I've also heavily whittled down this unit now, and I've still got loads of dudes left, so I can live with it. Again, the Grudge Throwers don't really do anything this turn. The Gyrocopter just flies over here to hide because it's lost a wound, doesn't want to get killed. So, into the enemy turn, you can see the Iron Drakes then, because they didn't follow me, they then have a flank charge into my rangers the next turn, which is going to give them more combat res. But I'm continuing to whittle them down, and I'm not taking massive casualties either. So then we're on to my turn 5. This combat's still going on. So everyone's in combat now. So as my opponent was pointing out, it's just down to dice at this point. We're not positioning. It's just throwing dice at each other. Who dies first? So in my turn 5, the Grudge Throwers kill the enemy Grudge Thrower. So it's about time. I think they both landed hits on it, by the way. One of them did the first 2 wounds by rolling a 1 on the D3, and then the next one finished it off. So that's good. Yep, so nice direct hits. Then in the combat, I've got the enemy Longbeards down to 1 model, and then the King is still there, and the BSB is still there, and the Gyrocopter charged into the flank of the Iron Drakes as well to join in, just to try and tip the combat res in my favour. But I ended up just losing combat by a small amount and falling back in good order away from the Iron Drakes, which puts me over here. And there's 1 Longbeard left. So, to finish off that final Longbeard, I think there were 3 left in the unit, and they were making, it was like 5 or 6 ward saves on a 5+ to save, and made just enough so that one of them is still alive. So if I kill 1 more Longbeard, that's the entire unit, which is very expensive. So I'm going to try and shoot that final Longbeard on turn 6, hopefully. Turn 5 for the enemy, and sensing that this 1 Longbeard on his own is the only thing standing between a positive result for me, the enemy are now moving away from me to preserve points. And then trying to shoot the Gyrocopter to death. And they succeed with that. So, on to my turn, what can I do? I can try and drop rocks on the final Longbeard, and I can move the Rangers forward to get some of them into view so they can shoot that unit as well. So, let's find out whether I can accomplish anything in the final round. And no. Everything missed. Didn't manage to kill the final Longbeard. So my opponent's got 1 turn left to try and shoot something, but really there's not much that can be accomplished now because all the Rangers are still alive mostly, so that unit's not going to be killed. So that's going to be the end of the game. So what is the final score? Because I've killed a Grudge Thrower, I've killed most of the Longbeard's unit, and I've killed the pony carts, which I didn't mention earlier because I can't remember exactly when it died. It could have been a rock actually that landed on that. And my opponent killed the Iron Drakes, And who else was in there? The Gunthane was in there. And my gyrocopter. So not a huge amount of killing either way. And the river was held by nobody. So, as a result of that, we've discovered that it's a small win for the evil dwarves. But, after doing some maths, if that one Longbeard had failed one of his ward saves and died, it would have been a draw. So, I feel like that would have been a very cool result there. I think that was a very fun game. Lots of dice being thrown at each other, loads of attacks both ways. And that's how you want a game of Warhammer to be, getting stuck into combat, throwing dice at each other until somebody falls over. And I think that would have been a fitting end to the game. A nice draw. But sadly, the one final Longbeard clings on to life, which means I only score a quarter of the unit's value. Which is another slight issue, I think, with the scoring system in the old world. Because obviously you're mostly scoring points for killing units. And if you leave one model alive or you leave a dragon on one wound, you either don't score much or you score nothing. So I think that is an issue with the scoring system that could be looked at. You know what YouTube is telling me now? I've just had a look at the browser. It says, now would be a good time to insert ads. The more viewers are watching, the more money creators earn by inserting ads. Give it a try. So let's close that. For anyone curious, by the way, I do have ads on the videos, but I've set it so YouTube doesn't insert them in the middle of the video because I find that annoying. And when they insert it themselves, they put like 10 million of them, which is weird and obviously horrible to view. After the video's finished, when it lets me, I then go in and insert like one per hour into the stream, which I think is more than reasonable. But I don't want YouTube to do it themselves because they put in about 10,000. So if anyone actually sees 10,000 ads on any of my videos, let me know because something's gone wrong and I need to fix it. Obviously, the money that comes into this channel is mostly on, let's see, there's YouTube ads and there's Patreon, which doesn't bring in that much, but it pays for like a quarter of a tournament ticket per month. And then there's PayPal as well, which is linked in the description. People do like that sometimes because I think it takes less in fees than Patreon does, and also they don't want regular payments going out. So yeah, if you want to give me all your life savings so that I can attend loads more tournaments and buy a ton more dwarves, then feel free. So, the next round. After a narrow nail-biting loss to the evil dwarves, the evil non-goblin green-based dwarves, we now move on to another wide battle against the Empire. The Empire of Man. So we're not killing other dwarves in this game, and we're not corner camping, but we do have a super long line of rangers. And we've got not a long line at all of Iron Drakes. So let's go through the list for the Empire in round 3. Pulling that up imminently as soon as I scroll down far enough to find it. There we go. So, here we go. We have Captain of the Empire, who is the Battle Standard Bearer on a Demigryph, which I believe is in a unit of infantry. Controversially, we've got a Demigryph in the middle of the infantry. Let's get some close-ups of them, actually. So, there it is. I think that's the Battle Standard Bearer there. Then, there is an Engineer hanging out with the cannons, of which there are 2 cannons there. The Engineer does not have a gun. There is a Priest of Ulrich, who is hanging out on a horse somewhere. That'll be him. There is a Wizard Lord, which is this guy, on a Pegasus, who's level 4 with Elementalism. And, hold on, is that the right one? Oh no, there's a Wizard Lord on foot, I think, with Elementalism. And then the Wizard Lord on a Pegasus has Demonology. Okay. With a Wizard's Staff and Arcane Familiar. And Battle Magic. So, quite terrifying there. In core, we've got some archers. This is a unit of... I think there's some crossbows. I think these handgunners are supposed to be crossbows, by the way. But there is a unit of 29 veteran state troopers, which are going to be these ones here, with a sergeant and standard bearer with banner of Iron Resolve. Then there's a detachment of state missile troops. And there are 12 state troops with hand weapons, which looks like that unit there. Yeah, because there's 2 extra guys dangling off the edge of the hill there. And 5 archers, and 5 state missile troops with crossbows. So the archers are scouting, and they've popped themselves right on the edge of the river at the start of the game. I didn't leave them any space to get behind my lines, because obviously it's 12 inches from the edge, and I've made a huge long line, and then I've positioned my war machines in such a way that they can't leave any space for the enemy to scout in there. I don't want archers behind my lines, I don't want to have to turn around, that's madness. So what are we looking at here strategy-wise? There's 2 cannons on a hill. I don't want my war machines to be shot by them, so I've got my war machines mostly hiding, and I'm going to try, and because the cannons are so far up, I'm going to try and kill them with my rangers actually, because I've got a huge long line, loads of shots. I don't suffer a penalty for long range, so they will get cover because I'm shooting over a river. So I'd be hitting them on 4s, and wounding them on 6s. But fishing for 6s with that many rangers I think is quite a viable way of killing cannons. So that is my plan for the cannons, if I get to see them, if certain infantry units move out the way of that one, for example. Also, I'm going to try and drop rocks on them. Oh yeah, I totally missed out some of the enemy units as well, because there's demigryphs. Over here, there's a unit of 3 demigryphs, and I think that's it. Oh yeah, there's 5 outriders there, who look suspiciously like peasants who have been drafted in as outriders. They do look a bit peasantly, don't they? Pleasantly peasantly. So, turn 1 goes to the evil empire of man, and look at this. Demigryphs moved all the way up here in the first turn. So they started off there, they were able to get a second move from a magic spell, which brings them right in front of me. And dodging the Doomseeker, they don't want to attack him. Which is valid. So how confident am I actually in this battle, and what's my tactics? I am very confident. I think the enemy have vastly more killable units than I do. So I think, like a unit of demigryphs, I think the Iron Drakes will make short work of them. I think the Rangers will shoot any of these small units. I'll be able to kill multiple of them by the end of the game, and I don't think they're going to touch me. So I'm extremely confident for this game. Going in, that was my thoughts. That can all go horribly wrong, of course, if I have one bad round of shooting and get killed. So, the cannon manages to shoot down a grudge thrower in turn 1 and a couple of Iron Drakes, so that's not very nice. And then the Iron Drakes, because they take more casualties from all kinds of fireballs and stuff, they actually fail their leadership and they fall back in good order off the edge of the hill. So suddenly, it's not looking too great here. You can see one of the demigryphs actually took damage going across the difficult terrain there, and there's also a vortex right there as well, which is not very friendly. So, these archers have also moved right up in front of me. Turn 1 for me. So, the gyrocopter gets into position and flames some of the peasants. I shoot my crossbows into one of the cannons that doesn't have a ward save on it, and I think I do a wound to this one. The Iron Drakes move up onto the hill, shoot the demigryphs and do some good damage there, so killed one, another one's damaged. The Doomseekers attempt charges. This one tries to charge the wizard and does not make the charge. This one just moves up into the river and takes a wound in the dangerous terrain. Empire cannons are certainly an abomination. So the issue is, Empire cannons versus Dwarf war machines. On the one hand, the Empire cannons, I believe, are lower toughness than our machines, which evens out the cannon versus cannon battle somewhat in terms of wounding when you hit. The issue is the +1 guaranteed wound versus our cannons, which are just straight up D3. So on average, our cannons take 2 hits to kill an Empire cannon, and an Empire cannon takes 1 hit to kill a Dwarf cannon, which is a huge discrepancy. The grudge throwers take 1 hit on average to kill a cannon, but they're vastly less likely to hit than a cannon. So enemy cannons just have the monopoly on murdering other war machines. Doom divers are actually really good at it as well, for the record. Doom divers and Empire cannons are really good at killing enemy war machines, because Doom divers can steer back towards the target, so they don't miss as often as normal catapults. So, whittle down enemy troops, and I am surprised to find out that the enemy peasants are charging into my rangers, but I will accept it. The demigryphs are charging into the Iron Drakes, so I'm going to be blasting them at point blank range. And one of them makes it in, but I do 3 damage on the stand and shoot. And you can see, I think this is a pillar of fire moving over me as well. So that's doing some damage. But obviously they're Iron Drakes, so 5+ ward save against flaming attacks. So it's not the scariest against them because it's wounding them on 5s. And then they get their armor save of a 6, rerolling 1s for Gromril armor. And then they get the 5+ ward. So I don't think pillar of fire is usually too much of an issue for Iron Drakes. And everything else is just moving up a bit. And my Doomseekers are just standing in the middle of the river, wondering who they're going to charge in the next turn. I'm already thinking that far ahead. The Outriders go across the river. One of them dies from dangerous terrain. And in the middle, all these troops move up. And I think the charge here was to kind of cover their advance. They were hoping one unit would maybe survive. But I don't think that was ever very likely, because 4 of them get killed with stand and shoot. And then the other one's going to take like 30 great weapon attacks, which is not good. So obviously, if you're a dwarf standing over here on your own, you can't punch 300 yards away. But if you've got a load of your mates there, your arm turns into like go-go gadget, and you can punch 300 yards down the battlefield someone in the face. By the way, on the topic of Linehammer, I was putting together a list to see what the stupidest line I can make of Rangers would be. And the biggest unit that I could fit in 2,000 points was 121 Rangers, because you have to have 2 other minimum units just to be a legal list, and then you need somebody as your general, so I stuck Burlock in there. So with that, you can have 121 Rangers fully kitted out, which is too wide to actually stretch out in one line across the table. You would have to have a second rank. But if you go diagonally, you could fit more. And if you ever lose a combat, you probably die immediately, because you're going to touch the table edge. But I think it would be hilarious having, like, 80 attacks back. I want to run that in a game at some point, so I'll find someone that can lend me some Rangers, and just for an experiment to see how hilarious it is to have, like, 100 wide Ranger unit. I wouldn't even be able to fit that many wide. How many can you fit on a table? You can probably get about 80, because you can go in at a slight angle. So probably 80 Rangers wide, I think. Process says, evening, do you remember if there is a 3rd wave of Dwarf releases to be due early next year? I'm pretty sure GW said they were doing 3 waves of Dwarf releases. Well, we've seen Burlock Daminson, the model, so it would be weird if that came out on its own, so maybe that'll coincide with a wave of, like, made-to-orders. That would be cool. Preferably, like, the 90s metal Longbeards that I really want. But we're definitely seeing some more, because we've already seen that one model, and it would be weird if it was just on his own. Because us Dwarf players that are sticking mostly purely to the old stuff and the new releases, not going into other manufacturers, not touching 3D prints, just keeping our Dwarves GW pure for the most part. Anything they release, I'm just going to be throwing my wallet at them and tell them to give it back when they've taken everything they need out of it, essentially. So, into my turn 2. And what do the Rangers get done this time? They shoot one of the cannons to death, fishing for 6s to wound and kill one of the cannons, living the dream. The Iron Drakes... Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, if we go back, these Demigryphs, one of them is actually... Let me see here. I think one of them is a character. Let's see, who is it? Grandmaster, there it is. I don't think I read out the Grandmaster on Demigryph. So he was in the Demigryph unit. And that's the General. So the General is actually still alive here. So loads of points there. So I kill off the Demigryph unit. And I attempt charges with my Doomseekers. So what I do is, let me show you where they were. So this Doomseeker charges the Wizard, who flees. I do not charge with this one, because I want him fleeing towards the table edge, not in this direction. So charging him with that, knowing he would flee. I then redirect my charge into this unit, so that they will also flee, because they would almost certainly die. So they're going to be fleeing in... Or does this one redirect its charge? I think this one's trying to charge the Demigryph Lord, the Grandmaster. So I don't want to charge them in positions where if they flee, they're going to stay on the table a long time. I want them going towards the edge so that on the off chance that they fail to rally, they would actually leave the table. So charging with that one, not that one, and then redirecting the charge into a different unit, and then them fleeing as well. And then I'm happy if I charge nobody, because I might kill myself in the dangerous terrain, which is good for a Doomseeker. And if they don't flee, I'll kill something. So I'm just firing off charges all over the place. Which leads to this madness. So the wizard is fleeing over here, near the table edge, but has a chance to rally. This guy chases them as well, so they're running, and he fails his charge into the Demigryph, who is down to his last wound as a result of all my Iron Drake shooting, but the Pillar of Fire is still popping around here as well, which is annoying. But down to his last wound, so if he even charges me, is that a total death wish? Because my stand and shoot probably takes one wound off him, and the general is dead. Interesting. And on the other side of the table, so I already mentioned that the cannon got killed. Jay says, I was trying to be all GW, but at some point I realised I've been way more loyal to them than they have been to me. Yes, that is very legit. So people who have like Highland miniatures armies, especially because a lot of the dwarves weren't available, I don't begrudge people for not going pure GW. It's just people like me who already have a massive dwarf collection, not wanting to sully it with other manufacturers' filth. But people who are especially starting fresh armies at the start of the old world when the dwarves weren't even available, I can definitely understand going the 3D print route. And if you want to add any of the cool new GW stuff, then fine. I don't feel a particular loyalty to GW as a company. I feel a loyalty purely to the dwarf model line, because I just like them a lot, and they were always my favourite Warhammer army back in the day. Used to look at all the pictures in White Dwarf, dream of one day having a massive army with all those models in it, and then being allowed to actually put that together later, living the dream. So, Pillar of Fire kills more of my Iron Drakes. Well, how about this? The wizard fails to rally and flies off the table. Wouldn't you know it? Now, that wizard had to flee anyway, because if it didn't flee, it would die. Because the Doomseeker would almost certainly kill it, with all the runes I've got on these guys. If you missed my description of the runes on the Doomseekers, by the way, one of them doesn't allow armor saves and gets extra attacks. One of them has -3 to the save and is +1 to hit. So they've got loads of attacks, increase their weapon skill, giving them more attacks. They just kill whatever they touch. But you can avoid them if you want. But you're most likely going to shoot them, but you won't get victory points. So the wizard is gone. This unit of Outriders does rally right behind the Iron Drakes. And the general fails a march test. So, what he ends up doing... Should the general have even taken a march test, actually? Is it if you're within a unit that has unit strength 5 you have to take a march test, or is it just an enemy unit in general? I don't remember. I know you don't have to take one if you're a flyer, I think. So, he decided to just walk towards the corner and hide as much as possible from everything, rather than charging in and being killed by stand and shoot. And I'm down to 1 Iron Drake in this unit now, and my Gunthane. So, the Gyrocopter swoops over the enemy lines, threatening to charge that cannon next turn. And... yeah, because I think I took a picture of that Gyrocopter prematurely, maybe. Or maybe I'd moved it there last turn, actually, and the enemy grape shot into it and did 1 wound. I think that's it. So my turn, the Rangers and the Grudge Thrower all take aim and blast a hole into the Empire big infantry blob. The Gyrocopter charges the cannon and dies, which is funny. Yep, get killed by cannon crew, very embarrassing. The Doomseeker charges into the enemy Demigryph general and kills it, which is great. And the Outriders are killed as well. So, the Outriders, let me see, just going to wind back a second. So, I think the Doomseeker charged them, and I think they fled off the table. I think they intentionally fled, because they knew they would get killed by the Doomseeker anyway. They didn't want to stand and shoot, because that would just give me victory points for kill, or not gain victory points for letting the Doomseeker die. If I charge into them, and leave one alive, it has to attack me and might kill me. And my opponent decided that it was more valuable for this Doomseeker to be alive than for this unit to be alive, so they intentionally flee off the table, which is a thing that is valid in this game. There are times when I've intentionally fled off the table to try and, for example, take a charging unit off the table with them, so they're off the table for a turn and can't charge something else. Giovanni says, I think it's only flyers and drilled units. Okay, good. So, here we go, back to where we were. So, the priest who was hanging out in the woods gets shot by my gun thane and killed, because he fled after the Doomseeker redirected his charge into him, and then I end up in the river. This one obviously killed the enemy general, so loads of points. So this is kind of what happens if you let the Doomseekers live. They just murder you. So you kind of have to, one of two ways. Either you guarantee they're never going to touch you and leave them alive, or you just kill them immediately and forget about it and just say, okay, that's 300 points I'm not scoring, and you're fighting my army at 1,700 points instead of 2,000. And that seems to be the way to go. Killing them definitely seems to be the way to go. Turn 4 for the enemy. So, this unit here, there is a spell available to one of the wizards around here, there he is, that allows a unit to teleport. I can't remember what it's called, but they put themselves in this position here, which means I do have a charge on them, but I'm in dangerous terrain, difficult terrain, which means that I would be using the lower of the two dice. So on average, I fail that charge, which means I'm unlikely to attempt it, because that means I'm not going to be moving as far as I could without doing that. And I'm also not going to be shooting because I've attempted a charge. So the cannon shoots down my Thane. Yeah, so my Thane and the Iron Drake are both dead. So I've lost some points there. So that's a big chunk of points killed in that one moment. All thanks to this cannon. And that's not very good. So now I need to think about killing more stuff, because the game is actually very close. The enemy are holding the river right now. So I want to take the river. Turn 4 for me. The Grudge Thrower finishes off the enemy cannon. Woo! The Doomseekers make their way towards the river to try and kill themselves by falling into a crocodile's mouth. And that's it for the turn. Turn 5 for the enemy. So these guys teleport themselves again towards a Doomseeker, which you might think is dangerous, but they're also getting away from my rangers. Colonel says, Linehammer 2, line harder. Linehammer 2, this time it's personal, or this time it's personnel in a line. So you can see what they're going for here. My plan in my final turns is to try and get as close to the river as possible so I can try and claim it, but if I want to do that, I'll have to whittle down this unit, which is now doable because my Doomseekers are in charge range. So the enemy are just moving up to next to the river so they can maybe score 200 bonus points for holding the river. My turn 5, I move forwards, put myself to within range of being able to reach the river in the last turn, and then do a bit of shooting. And they don't, by the way, the Rangers don't suffer -1 to their movement for this terrain because they have moved through cover. One Doomseeker makes the charge into the troops, the other one fails, but look at that, just cuts a huge swathe through them but does not die. Doesn't get killed with the attacks back. Turn 6 for the enemy. So, they do not want to engage the Doomseeker, which is probably valid on their part, and they're just standing off, hoping that enough of them live so that they hold the river. Into my turn 6. I move my line up to the river, so I've got loads of dudes there, and the other Doomseeker gets in, kills most of the enemy. This one gets killed, so that denies the enemy some points there. This one does not get killed, so that is going to be giving away 155 points, this Doomseeker, because he's not dead at the end of the game. And that is the end. So, let's look at the final result there. Just pulling that up. So, with me holding the river, because I've got this huge line of untouched rangers, and my Thane and my General and the Runesmith, my opponent's got a couple of small units, and then whoever's left alive in this unit, which, because the Doomseekers whittled them down so much, is not enough to counteract this mega unit I've got here. So I end up controlling the river, giving me bonus points, and I've killed a lot of stuff as well. So it's a 15-5 win for the Dwarves against the Empire. So, where did that one go? Well, it actually didn't start off very well on this flank. But the fact that I killed the enemy general over there, killed the Demigryphs, one of the Doomseekers managed to still get itself killed after the enemy tried to avoid them. So you pay the price if you leave these guys alive. If you just kill them, none of this is a problem. You get your general killed, you get most of this unit just cut to bits with their swinging axes, just twirling, twirling, twirling towards you. If anyone gets that reference, by the way, feel free to let me know. So good win for the Dwarves. Next round, we've got lengthways again. And we're up against the filthy, disgusting tree dwellers, the hippies of the old world, the Wood Elves. Process says future armor. It may be in future armor as well, but the one I was thinking of is the Simpsons episode where the aliens are disguised as the presidential candidates. But maybe they reference it in future armor as well. So, this is Linehammer of Doom against Wood Elves. Wood Elves are one of the armies that I feel like I'm going to struggle against. Reasons being, they have lots of skirmishers, so they're harder to shoot at. They have poison attacks, so they're very good at wounding me. And they have a lot of evading units that I can shoot at, and then they can move away from my range. So, could be a problem. They have longer range than me on some of their weapons as well. They've also, in this list, got 2 pillars of fire, which could be a problem. And I think there's a sneeze coming on, so I'll just mute myself. It was 2 sneezes this time, so I think I'm definitely coming down with some kind of winter-based ailment at the moment. Which makes sense because it has been very chilly out there, and as we know, colds bring on the colds. So, what have we got here from this filthy Wood Elf list? Let me pull that up now. But you can see that we've got loads of little units, which I like to see usually because I just look at that as points I can gain. If it's one massive unit like a Death Star, there's a lot of resources you have to pump into them before you get anything paid out. Small units, just kill 5 dudes, rack up some victory points. Next turn, 5 more dudes, rack up some victory points. So I'm quite confident I can pick off all these little units of 5 archers. So that will slowly but steadily score me points, which should encourage the enemy to come towards me to try and kill my units. I do have to get the Doomseekers killed, and if I hide, the enemy will just not come forward, so the Doomseekers are going to make a beeline straight for the enemy at the start of the game. So, let me grab that list. Wood Elves. Here we go. So there's a Spellweaver. Let me get some nice close-ups here. There's a Spellweaver, which I think is right there, who is a level 4. Ruby Ring of Ruin. And High Magic. There is, let's see, a Glade Lord on a Forest Dragon, who is lurking at the back, actually, right there. Which, this is a very cool Forest Dragon. And when I looked at the model, I thought, I've never thought anyone would be able to paint this in such a way that it fits in a Wood Elf army, because it's so evil looking. But actually, this is a really good job, and my opponent did inform me that it was someone else that actually painted the model, rather than trying to steal the credit for it. So, somehow, it works, I think. Then, that one has a Befuddlement of Mischiefs, an Annoyance of Nettlings, 2 Potions of Strength, Talisman of Protection, Armour of Meteoric Iron. So, an unrendable 5+ save, a 5+ ward, I think, and -1 to hit against it in challenges, I think all that adds up to. So this thing is very tricky, but it doesn't have a triple save, so it could be prone to me dropping rocks on its head, because it is a large target. What else have we got? We've got, let's see, characters. Core units, 12 Glade Guard, 5 Glade Riders, 5 Deepwood Scouts, 5 Glade Guard, 5 Deepwood Scouts. So lots of small minimum strength units. Then 2 lots of 5 Wild Riders, 2 lots of Sisters of the Thorn, who are mostly hiding, because I think my opponent senses as well that any unit of 5 that is cavalry is going to get shot to bits, because there's going to be no -1 for being skirmish infantry. So I think they would just die if they pop out. So it is a good idea to hide if you don't think they're essential to win the game. And then 5 more Deepwood Scouts. So, who is the other spellcaster? Because I feel like there are 2. There's one there. Is there another one on this side? Is the Glade Lord a spellcaster? I don't know. I can't see on the list. So maybe there's something missing in the list. Oh, Glade Lord's wizards. Do the Sisters of the Thorn, anyone like that, have magic spells? I don't know. Anyway, moving on. Turn 1, Wood Elves go first. We've got a Pillar of Fire drop down by this wizard right there. So that's going to be heading towards my Doomseeker probably. And you can see, by the way, that I deployed my Gunthane outside of a unit. The reason for that is that I think the enemy are going to stand off, and I want to pop out. If I got the first turn, pop out there, kill a cavalry unit. That's the dream. But because I don't get first turn, as soon as I get the chance, I'm going to run away and duck back into that unit for safety. Hopefully I do get the chance before the Pillar of Fire gets here. And another Pillar of Fire. Yeah, so who's casting that Pillar of Fire? Is this just the wrong list I'm looking at here? No, that's definitely the one that was matched up with me on BCP, Best Coast Pairings. Let me pull up the other Wood Elf list that was at the event and see if there's a mistake and that they've been switched somehow. Because the units look right. So this one has Spellweaver, Glade Guard. So this one's got units. Yeah, this one's got Dryads, so it's not that one. Sisters of the Thorn, they get bound spells. Ahaha, there you go then. So that'll be where the other Pillar of Fire comes from. So the list is correct. There's not an error in the list. So, Walk Between Worlds allows this unit to become ethereal as a spell as well. Which means they're going to be difficult to shoot, but the Gunthane, if they get close enough, can have a go at them. A couple of Rangers get shot down by enemy shooting, but there's a million of them left, so I'm not concerned about them being too whittled. Then another 2-drop. And then another 2. And suddenly, if they take out 6 a turn, actually, they might get something. But the dragon is staying out of range of one of my grudge throwers. To the point where there's no point me shooting at it with one of them. Because I'm way more likely to blow myself up than I am to kill a dragon. It would actually take me minimum 3 shots, I think, to kill this dragon. And after the first 2, it could just move backwards and hide and be out of range entirely, I think. So, it's not worth shooting at it right now. It's better off just trying to land rocks on units and then scattering into other units, into groups of units, like onto the cavalry, for example. So, Pillar of Fire kills a Doomseeker, which I can live with. And we've got a Magical Vortex, which is some kind of beverage there as well. And by the way, these Ghost Dwarves are actually a unit of scouts, but my opponent forgot to bring 5 scouts, so just used a few dwarf models. And then if any of the others die, then they just switch out, so that the good ones are still on the table. So my turn, I don't kill much. I kill 3 out of this unit, and my game plan is to shoot down one of these small units a turn, and that's where I'm going to get my points. If I only kill 3 a turn, then I am going to lose the game, because that's not going to be enough damage, and I can't advance. By the way, if I had deployed any further up, the enemy could put scouts behind me and then start shooting me with poisoned attacks into, like, war machines, which is not fun. So I had to deploy quite far back, and then I'm not going to advance because I don't want, like, the cavalry getting behind me or anything. I don't want the dragon landing behind me. So the dream is just kill 1 unit a turn, so I'm already failing at that. My Gunthane is sprinting back towards the Iron Drakes as well, hoping to get in there rapidly. Turn 2 for the enemy, the Vortex getting closer. The other Vortex getting closer, and we see a human hand right there with some dice. So the enemy, not being aggressive, just standing back and happy to shoot at me. Kill a few more rangers. Not too worried about that though. It's mostly been the second rank that's been dying at the moment, but they have shot up a little bit off the end now, which means that some of the cavalry could try and sneak by and get to the war machine, which we don't want. You can see my gyrocopter's hiding as well because it doesn't want to get shot. Pillar of Fire almost reaches me now, so I'm going to be able to hide in my turn. So back into the unit for the machine gun thing. Gyrocopter flies away from the Pillars of Fire. One of them does get through my unit. This one hasn't reached me yet. So all the rangers shooting. I do wipe out a unit of 5 scouts this turn. So I could have finished off the unit of 2, but I'm confident that I can kill 5 in one round. And that last one was just an anomaly of horrendously bad wound rolling, I think. So I killed a unit this time. And that's it. So not much going on. My turns are very quick. In this game, my turns are taking like 3 minutes, because all I'm doing is standing still and shooting at the enemy. And hopefully that's going to be enough to win. So I'm giving up the river. So Pillars of Fire, blast through, do a few casualties, but not too many, because both of these units have 5-up wards at the moment. This one from the BSB, this one from being Iron Drakes. They get a 5-up ward against flaming attacks. So the Pillar of Fire only wounds my units on 4s, and it does actually roll a 6 and wound my war machine as well. So there's some casualties not been removed yet. Okay, so what's being measured out here? My opponent is checking the line of sight of some of my models and then marking out where he needs to hide. Because a lot of these units have reserve move as well. So they can move somewhere, shoot, and then reserve move out of my line of sight so I can't charge them. Because you obviously don't want to get charged by this line of Dwarf Rangers. That would be very silly as a small Wood Elf unit. So this unit of cavalry move up behind the terrain because they don't want to get shot. But they're also in a position where they can potentially come out and do something later if the game's not going well. Some more shooting, whittling down some more rangers. And what's this? Stepping across the line. And actually there's a reserve move to come that wasn't captured in this photo. But turn 3 for me. So, more shooting, but Pillars of Fire do some more damage first. And there's that reserve move, by the way. So my shooting doesn't do much this turn at all, mostly fails horribly. And I'm not concerned about being flank charged by this unit, because my Thane would just fight his way through the ranks, which is weird, fighting your way like 2 feet across the table. I think that is how it works. I don't think there's a limit on... The way there is a limit on manoeuvres, how you can't move more than twice your movement, I don't think that applies when you're busting your way through the ranks to get to the fighting rank. If there is an exception to that in there, someone let me know. But I don't think that stops you from doing it. Otherwise, I would just have to put him further into the middle. And avoid prevent him from putting a residual ward save onto nearby units from one end. So, Grudge Throwers, the Gyrocopter's hiding over here now, because the Pillars of Fire have all gone the other way. So I'm just flying away from them. And also, what I'm presenting here is a deterrent. If you want to charge this Grudge Thrower, even if you kill it, the Gyrocopter's then going to charge you. And if you're scared of that, that's your choice. So, you can see I haven't done much damage to these scout units at all. There's 2 missing from that one, 3 from that one. And this unit keeps becoming ethereal. Turn 4 for the enemy. So Pillar of Fire. I've got actually a gap between my units now, so it's not just bouncing endlessly between both of them. And I actually got rid of the other one last turn, I think. I dispelled it with my Fated Dispel. So not much accomplished there, but this charge does come in. Now I think with the angles involved, let me just go back. I think it should have been more like here. So I think the unit should have lined up there, like 2 of them sticking out into the woods, rather than this angle. So I think we've done that a little bit incorrectly, but it's not going to make a difference anyway. So all of them hoping to kill the Grudge Thrower. These guys move up. We've marked out where my Thane with a handgun can shoot up to, so that they don't get shot, and they can move into range, shoot, and then move back out again, because they're Wood Elf scum. And they keep becoming ethereal as well. So, what's this? We've got a suddenly very brave Forest Dragon. So I think because the Rangers have been whittled down by about half, the Forest Dragon thinks, you know what, I want a piece of this. I want to get into this action now that the odds are slightly in my favour. I'm not going to hide anymore. Which I'm cool with, because it means I can try and shoot it with grudge throwers and maybe send it back running away again if I can wound it. So, one crew member dies, 2 cavalry get killed, and the grudge thrower wins the combat against the cavalry, which is hilarious. Actually, it's a draw. I lied. I think it was a draw, which means no one goes anywhere. So, my turn. The gyrocopter joins in with the fight, charges into the cavalry, and wins the fight. This last one flees. I do not catch it, which is very sad because it means there's one fleeing model which is going to deny me a little chunk of points. And the grudge thrower now lives to fight another day because the gyrocopter swooped in to save the day. You can see this pillar of fire is still running amok back there. And yeah, fleeing, there we go. A nice flea marker there just to make that abundantly clear. And I'm edging the Iron Drakes up a little bit because I want to get into range for the Gun Thane to shoot this unit at some point. Other than that, not much accomplished. I've turned the Rangers round a bit just so they can be prepared for the potential of a dragon coming and landing in front of them. Turn 5 for the enemy. So this guy continues fleeing, does not rally. The dragon does move up. It can't fly, remember, over the river because of the rules of the event. But it's now in the zone where it can charge into my Rangers. And the scouts do a bit of shooting. They do not kill the gyrocopter, which is good. And that's going to be the turn. So I've got one more turn of enemy attacks to come in, and I've got 2 turns. So what do we do with this one? Well, the grudge thrower tries to shoot the dragon and blows itself up. Actually, no, I think I tried to shoot this guy, this final cavalry member. If I'd killed that one, I would have scored the full points for the unit. But the grudge thrower blew itself up instead. Because why not? Okay, so that is bad, because I've barely killed any units yet. And there's only 1 turn to go. You can see that the enemy have cast a bit of blocking terrain there as well, which is going to limit my shooting ability into this unit. There's a little tree on it to show that a forest has sprung up there. Gyrocopter's still just hanging out, hoping to not get killed. This grudge thrower has also moved, because I want the dragon to charge my rangers. I don't want it to charge these 2, so that's why they're hiding at the back behind the woods. And I've positioned my rangers in such a way so that if the dragon charges them, it has to maximise, and the position it would be in would not lead to an overrun into the war machine. Turn 6. So, a charge into the rangers. And for some reason I completely forgot to stand and shoot, by the way, in this turn. I don't know why. I think I just probably had it in my head that it wouldn't do anything. But it definitely could have done. However, I do not get as whooped as it seemed, and hold up quite well. And we have a challenge with the dragon versus my BSB Thane with a 2-up save and a 5-up ward save. And as a result of that, I only take 2 wounds. I've got a static combat res that's pretty good. So the enemy give ground. And I choose to try and restrain so I don't follow, because I don't want to be in combat with it again, because it might just eat him next time. So I'll just accept the dragon's going to live, but so am I. So in my turn, what can I do? I can try and dispel this with my Fated Dispel, move up with the Gun Thane and shoot that unit and try and kill it. And try and kill something with a Grudge Thrower. Unless the Vortex kills it first. Turn 6 for me. So the Pillars of Fire fail to do anything again, which is quite funny. I have a few shots blasting at this unit of cavalry, I think, from the Rangers. Don't do anything. The Handgun Thane kills a couple of those dudes, not enough. The enemy have control of the river, which is 200 points. Which means that with the kills I accomplished, because I killed some scouts, there's a unit that's fleeing that's below 25% over there. So with all the points I scored and the points the enemy scored, the enemy actually killed 0 of my scoring units. I killed 1 myself. The Grudge Thrower got itself killed by attempting to shoot. And because the Grudge Thrower killed itself, it is an 11-9 loss. If the Grudge Thrower didn't kill itself, I think it was a draw. Wow, wow, wow. So Grudge Thrower dead, and it's a tiny loss because of that. So obviously the Wood Elves did not commit in this game. They didn't really have a reason to, because I think 2 pillars of fire just dropped in front of my army and then you run off and hide. I think there's potential that that could win you the game. Because if you just move back and forth over my low wound units, like the war machines over and over, and then I would be advancing on the river at that point if you're hiding. So at worst, you probably end up with a draw, because the Doomseekers on average don't get themselves killed moving towards you. And they'd be going through the river, so they'd go slower, so they'd probably just choose to stay in the river and try and jump into a crocodile's mouth and die that way. But on average, I think you win the game if you just throw out 2 pillars of fire and then hide. Which is obviously dumb as a spectacle. But if you advance into me with all your cavalry, then they get shot to death and you lose. So why would you do that? So this strategy obviously paid off because my shooting was a little bit subpar, should have killed a few more of these small units. With the amount of rounds I had shooting with the Rangers, probably should have killed all 3, 1 per round. You'd expect to, because I was hitting them, they're skirmishers, so I was hitting them on 5s with like 25 shots and then wounding on 3s, so I would have expected to have killed them all by the end. But alas, the Iron Drakes didn't really do anything. My opponent was obviously rightly concerned about going near them, and the Gunthane got a couple of shots off but mostly missed and didn't do enough to that unit to get me any extra points. So it's a tiny loss, and this is the kind of list I was concerned about, but it didn't go the way I thought it would. It didn't go badly for the reasons I thought it would. I thought a game against Wood Elves would go badly because the poisoned attacks would chew through my units fast enough. There would be forest dragons, and there would be annoying little units that were just chipping away at me and then running away. The reason I ended up losing is because I just couldn't kill them with my shooting. When I saw the list, I was expecting to be able to take out all these small 5 model units and then win just based on that by a small margin, forcing the enemy to then engage, at which point I can shoot the cavalry and kill them. The dragon was scared of coming out, rightly so, because the grudge throwers would have been aimed right at it, and then while I still had a huge line of rangers, you wouldn't want to be fighting them, because there's going to be a devastating stand and shoot even when I forget to do it, which didn't really help here anyway. Okay, pictures of the armies during lunchtime on day 2 that were out for display. So we've got some dwarves, and this is a real Warhammer army, not like a stupid line army like mine. We've got a block of dwarf warriors, we've got some war machines as backup, we've got an anvil, and then we've got some small units, which as far as I'm concerned, gameplay-wise, are just a points liability. Because they're going to die easily. A huge Death Star isn't going to die easily, so you're just giving up points, and it's because of the dumb way that the old world is scored purely on what you kill. So it discourages lists like this, I think. It encourages you to build 1 mega unkillable Death Star, or maybe 2 unkillable Death Stars. Very cool army though. Very nice, some old school dwarf models mixed in with some more recent stuff. And by more recent, I mean like this guy. So to me that's recent, because it's not in the 90s. Got some of the old classic dwarf warriors mixed in with some others. We've got the old gyrocopter. I want one of these. I don't have one. I've got the other generations of gyros, but not that one. We've got wolves of the sea. Obviously very chaotic and wolf-like, with some skin wolves who are probably very powerful to the point of being too powerful at the moment. Let's have a look at the chats where I haven't looked for a couple of moments. Saurus Blood says, you were probably thinking of Sisters of the Thorn. Yeah, we already had that comment. Voltron, who says, Sisters of the Thorn. Yep, I already had that one. Voltan. Voltron and Voltan in the same chat. This is an honour. Objective victory points did work this weekend. Love to see it. Yep, it just gives you something more to fight for on the table, and I think Old World needs that. I actually think killing things is just a bad scoring system in the first place. Because if you just have a better army than the enemy, you're very likely to win. Obviously, there's player skill involved, but if you're a better player, you have a better army, you just win. If there are objectives to play for that maybe don't suit your army, then that gives the opposition a chance. If your opponent plays the objectives better than you, gets their positioning right so that they end up scoring for holding certain areas at the end of the game, or certain units survive that needed to, just other victory conditions mix up the game so much and make it much more exciting and interesting, and force more balanced lists without one mega Death Star. As an example, if Kings of War, the game that I think is probably the best, purely as a rule set, probably the best mass battle fantasy game, if that had scoring like the old world, where it was purely on what you kill, then you would not see like 75% of the units that you see now. The big unkillable, really tough to shift units would just be dominating, I think. Whereas with it now, units dying doesn't generally score you any points. So small units that can like be chaff aren't just giving away free points. Mostly, some tournaments do reward kill points in terms of your score, but not all of them do. Just to win the game, rarely kill points come into it. So you'll have chaff to like redirect the enemy and not worry about giving away their points. You can hold them back, pounce on objectives at the end of the game. You can put them in the path of the enemy so that they can't get to your strong unit that's holding a crucial area of the battlefield. In the old world, any of those units are just points liabilities. So you'd see a lot more exciting armies that would be competitively valid while also being interesting to look at if the scoring was different in the old world, I think. Let's see. Volton says, from what I could tell, no one really built for the objectives due to production meta. Would make for better games in future if more things like this event happen in future. Yeah, I think Death Star is not the most fun that the old world could be. I think the rules should encourage wide variety of units to be used all together, supporting each other, not just all built into one mega Death Star of Doom. Which is a problem Warhammer's always had with the army composition. I remember 8th edition, Death Stars were a big thing. You would have like a big, steadfast, really deep unit that would have some killer characters in it. You could have like skeletons with ethereal units on the front rank, I think. It was a weird time. So, anyway, we're looking at the armies. Wood Elves. Lovely dragon. Empire. Oh no, this is Bretonnians. So, look at that. A very nice men-at-arms. And very uniform, which is how they should be looking. And then you want the knights to be looking more individual. So, no real horses in this army that I can see. Oh yeah, there are over there. Small amount. Mostly Pegasus Knights, though. It's exiles, so there are some bombards in there as well. Some foot knights there. Then we've got Wood Elves again. Very nice. Very stylish. Nice basing. With Dryads, which are some of the cooler looking Wood Elf units, I think. We have got some Beast Men. With Dragon Ogres. We've got some Spawn. Got some Doom Bulls by the looks of it. Chariot. Very cool. I've played against this player's Beastmen army before, but the list wasn't the same. Then we've got the mighty Dwarves that seem to be scooping up all the event wins at the moment. And obviously this kind of Death Star list doing well for the Dwarves. We've got more Dwarves with more Death Stars, so this is quite similar to my list actually. A big block of Rangers who are mostly deployed for combat by the looks of it here, rather than a super line, but I think it's the same size as my Ranger unit, with a Gunthane, with a more tooled up character than I've got in mine, just one Grudge Thrower, and some Iron Drakes with another character on Shield Bearers. So this list actually, some of these Rangers turn into a small unit of Quarrelers just to make the list legal, because the Grudge Thrower doesn't count as one of your 3 minimum units because it's a war machine. But I've played against this army quite a few times now. One of the coolest looking dwarf armies. Very nice gemstones. Very nice attention to detail on the paint job. One of the cleanest painted dwarf armies out there. Then we have got some Empire. We've got some Ogres, which is always nice to see. Don't see too many of those. We've got a spider warning for anyone that has maybe some kind of phobia. Here are some spiders. One of them's a bit too realistic looking. Very hairy spider with some orcs in there as well. We've got some Bretonnians. And again, we're not seeing a lot of knights. We're seeing Pegasus Knights, we're seeing infantry. But we're not seeing a lot of Grail Knights or Questing Knights. Jay says, any thoughts on the Empire update? this weekend. So I haven't looked too much into that yet, but I shall. Lovely Bretonnians there. Green Knight, obviously. We've got some goblins with the Doom Divers and the Rock Lobbers. Very dangerous in War Machine versus War Machine battles. And there's also some Black Orcs, nice clean highlighting on them, and a Wyvern in that army. So some people obviously not confident they're going to get any best army votes because they've just got them perched on the trays. We've got some nice Wolves there. And we've got some Skaven, so just the filthy masses of Skaven. Lots of infantry there. Storm Vermin, very cool. I think they're the best looking Skaven unit. And the final game. So we've got the long deployments again, and it is Bretonnian Exiles, or Bretonnian Textiles if you want to insult them. So we've deployed in opposite corners. What does that mean for the game? Well, let's find out. Let me go into my opponent's list right here. So, oh, by the way, I just had a message a little while ago. I'm going to rant about this live on a Warhammer stream, by the way. So, the delivery company Just Eat. I've ordered, over the years, quite a few McDonald's orders from them. And very frequently, the order's been incorrect. One really hilarious time, one order just didn't turn up, and then the next one, or the first one, they delivered like 5 McFlurries instead of chicken nuggets. And then the second order just didn't turn up at all. So just probably dumped in a canal somewhere because they couldn't find the house. And there's just a string of these orders that have had mistakes in them, which they've been very good at refunding immediately. However, this most recent one, there was an incorrect item in there, and they are now refusing to grant any refunds on order issues because of a history of claims. How do we feel about that? Because to me, a history of claims for the orders being wrong suggests they should talk to the restaurant and tell them to actually put the right items in the bags, rather than thinking that I'm trying to defraud them out of one large fries every couple of months. So I say that all 44 people in here, plus me, we should take a stand and boycott Just Eat until they reinstate my refund privileges. We've got the power. With this many people, we have a voice. Let's use it. Anyway, back to Warhammer. Hopefully everyone was entertained by that side ramble. Pulling up the list for the Bretonnian Exiles. So, what have we got here? We have got quite a few knights on horses, weirdly enough, for Bretonnians. We have got Pegasus Knights, though, so we've got 3 of them with a Baron. The Baron is on Royal Pegasus with Charmed Shield, Virtue of Knightly Temper, Gromril Great Helm. Nigel says, need to start using delivery comp first. Yeah, I'm going to suggest some serious comp come in on the delivery companies. Just to tie that back in with wargaming a bit. So we've got the Baron, we've got a Paladin, who is on a Warhorse, who is the Battle Standard Bearer, hanging out with this big unit of Knights of the Realm. That's what we want to see, a nice big unit of Knights in a lance formation. That looks cool. We've got an Outcast Wizard, level 3 on a Warhorse, who's hanging out down here somewhere with these Yeomen. And then the Green Knight, obviously. 275 points of green ethereal badness, who just pops up out of the woods, charges you. Even if he dies, he probably comes back again. And then if it gets late in the game and thinks, it's a bit risky now, might not come back, he can just run off and hide and preserve his points. So there have been times I killed the Green Knight 3 or 4 times over the course of a game. And the Green Knight is present here. So I'll talk about my deployment and how it's entirely to counter the Green Knight in a minute. 8 Mounted Knights of the Realm, which is that nice unit there. The Rat says, McDonald's and Just Eat simply cannot afford to risk being defrauded 1 large fries every few weeks. Well, you know what? I think the amount that would eat into McDonald's profit margins versus me not being a customer, so you're losing like an order every 3 months. I think they've probably made the right choice there. I think they've got to take a stand against people trying to defraud them out of large fries. I'd bang my hand on the desk here, but it would be incredibly loud on the microphone, I think, so I won't do that. So Knights of the Realm. Then we've got 2 other units of Knights of the Realm hiding in the corner. 2 units of 5. So those 2 are definitely point liabilities in this game. If they pop out, they die. So I would just hide those 2 units. 5 Mounted Yeomen, as we said. 10 Peasant Bowmen. 5 Pegasus Knights. And 2 Bombards, which are just better than Dwarf Cannons. So they're Strength 10, I think, and they also have the D3 plus 1 damage. So why is everyone's cannon more damage than a Dwarf Cannon? It truly is ridiculous. Now, I was back in the old world, back in the real old world, back in 8th edition, I was one of the proponents of changing the damage of a cannon from D6 to D3 plus 1. So it was less wildly swingy, more predictable, and it wouldn't one-shot big monsters anymore, which was a problem in 8th edition, big time. But that's not a problem anymore, because all the big monsters have 3 different saves, so the chances of a cannonball getting through are slim in the first place. And I don't see why the Dwarf Cannon is the only one that has less damage, so on average it just loses in all the War Machine versus War Machine battles. It ain't fair, I tell ya. So that's the Bretonnian list. Let's go back to the wide shot and talk about my deployment and the reasoning behind it all. Nigel says Dwarf Cannons are short cannons. Yes, but then make them cheaper, is what I would say to that. Yes, very true. They are short. Okay, here we go. So we've got the Doomseekers out there near the enemy because they obviously want to get killed or kill something. One or the other will do me. Everyone else just defending this corner. So the enemy are probably going to try and come round and not fight both my units at once. You only want to fight one of them. So you don't want to come in down here and eat all the Iron Drakes, stand and shoot. You also don't want to come down here and eat loads of Rangers, stand and shoot. So you want to try and get something else in there first. If you could put like the Green Knight in there, then that would be ideal. If you could keep him in combat and then charge other things without the stand and shoot being a concern. Now, to prevent the Green Knight being an issue, I've put the Iron Drakes outside of charge range of those woods where he could appear. I've put the Rangers within charge range, but I've put the Gun Thane with a good view of those woods. So if you charge in here, his stand and shoot with a magical handgun will do some damage to the Green Knight. I've also got my Thane with a magic weapon in there to challenge the Green Knight, and I've got so much static combat res here, I think I would just whoop the Green Knight's green ethereal behind. So I'm not worried about it particularly at the moment. If the Green Knight wants to attack the Iron Drakes, then I will move my Thane into that unit so that I can then challenge him with the Thane, who's got a magic weapon. So that's why I'm keeping my units close together. Now, the Grudge Throwers. Because I have units on this hill, the cannons can actually hit me. It was decreed by the TO of the TSN Arena, Mr. Rob, that if there's no units on this hill, the cannon can't just pick a random spot on a hill and say, I'm going to shoot there, and let the cannonball bounce onto something it can't see. That's the ruling. But because there's a unit here it can hit, it could hit the unit first and then bounce through onto the Grudge Thrower. So why have I allowed that to happen? Because if we look at the other side of the table, let's see, over here, I could have deployed my Iron Drakes in this gap. I could have deployed my Rangers in this gap. I could have put my Grudge Throwers out of position for the artillery to target with this big, massive building here. Problem is, if I do that, that is an impenetrable fortress that nobody can hope to get any flanks on. And why would my opponent try and charge me? Why would you even attempt to do that? So I think a Bretonnian player looking at that would think, there is no way I'm going to achieve anything against your list. I'm just going to sit back and hope your Doomseekers don't kill themselves by the end of the game and I'll take a win. Or if they do kill themselves, I'll take a draw. And I think that's perfectly valid thinking. I think that position is too well defensible, and it's not like my opponent needs to win big against me to win the event or something. We're not the top table. So I don't think that would create a game if I defend this corner. I think we just don't have a game. So the fact that I've defended this corner means that I'm leaving it somewhat open for the enemy to attack me, because there are ways you can get into this unit's flank and you can get multi-charges on me because I'm not in such a narrow space. On the other hand, if I put the grudge throwers out there on their own to avoid being shot by artillery, they just get killed, and then my opponent can hide and win the game. So, I put them back here, so that they may well get killed by bombards, but at the very least, the enemy can't just eat them with, like, yeomen, and then hide for the rest of the game. They have to come over here if they want them, if the bombards don't get the shots through. And I've also got them within 6 of my BSB, so they're going to get a 6-up ward save as well in the shooting phase. So that is my thinking behind this somewhat illogical positioning of that unit. The gyrocopter's hiding out behind this building, so that if anyone wants to come down the flank, the gyrocopter can maybe charge them. If the horn is blown from the Bretonnians, the gyrocopter won't be able to fly, which I should say I think is a stupid item to exist in the game. Something where if you just roll a leadership test, the enemy can't fly, just because it affects certain factions vastly more than others, which I think is just bad from a game design perspective. Completely shutting down certain army builds 100% and having zero effect on other armies I think is just bad. I think it would be much better if the horn, if it's expensive, let's see, how much is that horn? It can't be that expensive because everyone seems to take it. And if you made it cheaper, but if the horn was in effect, then enemies would have to take a leadership test to fly, or they'd have to do some other kind of test to fly, then I could live with that. Or if they fly, then they treat the air they're flying through as dangerous terrain because of the reverberations of the mighty horn. I could live with that as well. Just tone down your horn, GW, is what I'm saying. So, here we go, into turn 1, and I get to go first. So, Doomseekers, straight towards the enemy. The Pegasus Knights have a vanguard move as well, by the way, which is why they're up here. And I'm not doing much shooting, so my first turn is just move, miss with a couple of rocks, turns over in 2 minutes. There we go, enemy turn. Green Knight pops up in the woods, miles away from me. Pegasus Knights charge one Doomseeker, but not the other. And my opponent did check to make sure that it wouldn't bring the other one into combat, so apparently only wants to fight one Doomseeker at a time, which is perfectly valid. And charges one of them. The Green Knight has appeared over there and is hiding out by this house. Obviously does not want to charge my Rangers, wants to charge the Iron Drakes instead, or wants to sneak around the back of my army. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to transfer my Thane into this unit in a minute, so that'll deter him from charging. And then I'll see what he does from there. The gyrocopter, you can see, the horn is in effect, so the gyrocopter can't fly, so I've put a little token there to mark that. The Doomseeker gets killed, the other one gets magicked to death. So, I'm fine with that. Doomseeker's dead, not giving away any points. They didn't really get to do anything, but that's okay. Against this list, with all cavalry, they were only going to be a liability if the enemy ran away from them, because it's possible I might not catch them over the course of the game. Turn 2 for me. Repositioning a little bit, moving the Thane into this unit, and you can see the lines broken a bit there because they're on the edge of the hill, so they just wouldn't stand up. So a little bit of rejigging, but not much. And the gyro is just hiding a bit. Nothing else. The grudge throwers miss again, and turn 2. Oh, by the way, in the first 2 turns, or in the first turn for the Bretonnians, the bombards both failed to hit the grudge throwers, which is fortunate. So, the Lord pops out here. He's a Baron, actually. So, Bretonnian Baron leaves the Pegasus unit and flies over here. So he could get charged by a gyrocopter, but he's not scared of that, apparently. And Knights of the Realm moving up behind this building. The Pegasus Knights flap over there as well. So the gyrocopter is going to be able to charge the Knights of the Realm. The big unit of Knights of the Realm goes into the woods. These guys have moved through cover. Into the river, should I say. So, the Green Knight. I don't like what the Green Knight is laying down right here. I think he is threatening to get round the back of my army and start attacking things from the rear or the flank. Get into the flank while something else charges in the front, maybe, which means most of, or certain of my models would only be able to attack an ethereal model. Which wouldn't be that much of an issue if he was attacking the flank, actually, because only that fighting rank would be able to hit him. But still, you'd give some combat res. And he just doesn't want to get shot by my magic handgun. He doesn't want to get hit by my magic great weapon. Those are the 2 things he wants to avoid. And the Doomseekers, who are now both dead. So, what am I going to do to deny this? The Iron Drakes are going to start shuffling sideways, because I don't want this guy sneaking around the back. And then my Rangers are going to try and angle themselves so that the Baron isn't going to be flanking them at some point. So Doomseekers are dead. One Iron Drake gets shot by peasants as well, I think. Or it could just have been with a fireball. And the Bombard kills one of the Grudge Throwers, as you'd expect, because they're just better at War Machine versus War Machine. So, one dead. Turn 3 for me. Gyrocopter charges the Knights of the Realm. They do their counter charge, but they don't roll particularly high on that. So the Gyrocopter does actually get some hits through, but they save them, do some wounds back. Gyrocopter loses and gives ground. So holding them up a little bit. We've got a Pillar of Fire coming towards us now, which doesn't look very fiery, because my opponent ran out of templates, and I don't have an orange small template because it's disappeared or someone's stolen it at an event. Can you believe it? I've also lost one of my orange pens as well. And a Dwarf dice. One of the GW Dwarf dice that no one can read, so I don't roll them very much. One of those has vanished as well. So they're probably like under the table at the TSN Arena. In fact, I know for a fact one of my orange dice is under the table at the TSN Arena right now because I forgot to get it after it fell down there. So I'll have to go in there at some point and retrieve that. So, the Green Knight's just hanging out, not too eager to throw himself in yet. But what's this? He now declares a charge into the Iron Drakes, so I can't stand and shoot, but hopefully the Thane will kill him. Knights of the Realm into the gyro. So, Green Knight smacks into combat. The Duke, or the Baron should I say, hides outside of my line of sight, so I can't charge him. And at this point, obviously, I'm going to try and wrangle so he's not in the flank anymore, but it's going to be difficult with a unit of this size. The Knights of the Realm, the big unit, get into the woods, so they are now poised to strike. Although if they charge out of it, they would be on the lowest of 2 dice on the charge, so they may not make it. And the Bretonnians are really committing to this flank. I thought the Bretonnians were going to be way less aggressive than this. I didn't think they were going to be attacking me at all. Because I thought, even though I didn't go for the super defensive corner, I think this is still quite menacing. And I think just this guy is a threat on his own. I don't think all this is maybe necessary. I think he could be a menace without them. But we'll see what my opponent has in mind. So, the Bombard kills the other Grudge Thrower, as you'd expect. Pillar of Fire is getting closer, and they can reserve move back behind the woods. Reserve move is a rule. I'm not sure how I feel about that either. Popping out, shooting, and then popping out back to where you came from. I don't know how I feel about it. I also don't know how I feel about the... Is it evasive, it's called? Where you shoot at something and then they can move away out of your firing range. I don't like it, but I don't know if it's necessarily game-breaking or anything. And maybe if I was using it, I would like it more. So the Gyrocopter gets killed by Knights of the Realm. The Green Knight is dead. Gets killed in the challenge by the Thane. He doesn't actually get outright killed, but he takes enough wounds so the combat res kills him. So Green Knight's dead once. Woo! And onto my turn 4. So I'm going to try to wrangle this so that this guy only has a front charge on me. We'll see if that's doable. And I think it is doable, but the only way would be to make my unit into a smaller, compact square with a reform, and I still want to be a line. So, I think, you know what, I'll just let you charge my flank. I've got some decent combat res here, and I can challenge you with my most survivable dude, which would be my Thane, because he's got a shield and full plate armor, this guy, I think. So, yeah, maybe you won't kill me. And maybe I won't lose by too much, maybe I'll just give ground and not die. I was actually thinking that if you charge in the flank and I give ground, would I then spin round and give ground backwards away from you and then touch the edge and die? But apparently that's not how give ground works. If I fall back in good order, then I think you turn round about your centre and then move away, which potentially bounces through the Iron Drakes and off the table as well. So being charged in the flank, even though I'm allowing it here, rather than going compact, I'm not too concerned about it, even though it could kill the whole unit. I'm of the attitude where I want to stay in a line. I don't want to compromise my principles and go into any kind of cube-based formation. No kind of squares, no rectangles. We just want a nice long line. Turn 4 for the enemy. So, Pillar of Fire is getting closer. And kills a few more models, but not much. Charge is declared there, so this was the best I could do, and it still prevents... the best I could do while staying in a bit of a line. I could have probably gone more in, but I think it's still a flank. It would have just made the charge harder. So, he gets in there, into the flank. So, we're in the panicked zone for this unit now. Potentially, could be the end of them. Everyone else just moves up ready to strike next turn. So this guy's pinning them in place, so that if the combat continues, if I give ground, for example, and he follows, then I'll get stuck in that position, and then they can look to then charge later once I'm not standing and shooting. He was thinking about triple charging me with all these 3 units. So the Knights of the Realm, who would probably have not made it because they're in the terrain, the Pegasus Knights, who may have made it, but I could have stood and shot against them, and with the Thane handgun and all those crossbows, even if you were within range, I've still got the throwing axes, so you would have taken a lot of damage on the way in, which is obviously not ideal. And Pillar of Fire still doing its thing. The Bombards still doing their thing, still just chipping away at me. So in combat, what does the Baron accomplish in the challenge against my Thane? Well, what's wrong with this picture? The Baron rolls 3 1s on his wound rolls, does no damage to me. I do no damage to him. I defeat him with my static combat resolution because I have a Rune of Battle on the Standard Bearer. The Baron then fails 2 leadership tests, falls back in good order, off the table, and dies. Let's take a deep breath and let that one sink in for a moment. So that's just earned me 400 points, because he's the enemy general. Yes. Okay, now we can move on. I think that we gave that the pause that it needed. So when I restrain from chasing after him, I then get a reform so I can turn around, so I'm now in a better position to face the enemy as well. Yes, Matt, that is Warhammer. It's a dice game. If you send your general into a unit that has some static combat res, you might fail. Let that be a lesson to you. Any Bretonnian barons out there thinking of flank charging my lines. So into my turn 5 now. So because I got that reform, I'm going to be able to get some good shots off now. So, with my shooting, I don't have to reposition the Rangers really at all now. I'm in a good position. I shoot down a couple of Pegasus Knights, which is great. And that's about it. So at the moment, the game is very close. It's looking like possibly a draw right now. Turn 5 for the enemy. So after much deliberation, the Bretonnians weighing up whether to throw everything into the Rangers, take my stand and shoot, which is going to have a fair few shots because the ones on the hill can shoot as well. Or do you go after the Iron Drakes, who are going to have a stand and shoot if you go in with this unit? Do you charge the flank of the Iron Drakes with the Pegasus Knights? There's only 2 of them, and I think there's a champion in there, so you're going to end up in a challenge with my Thane, who's untouched, and who has got a really good save, and I've got some good combat res in this unit as well. My opponent decides, you know what? The reason we're Bretonnian exiles is because we're cowards and we're going to run away. Which is a valid strategy if you think charging in is certain death. Then running away is something that is entirely valid. So all the units decide to run away. They can't run away that far, but they run away anyway. And then the Green Knight manages to pop up back to life, so he's just hanging out around here. And then they're just going to try and maximise the number of models that are on the river to try and score that at the end of the game, because it's scored based on who's got the most models on it. And so into my turn 6, what am I going to do from this position? All I can really do is shoot crossbows and the gun Thane at these Knights of the Realm that have run away. Not out of my range though, so I'm going to get quite a few shots on them. Hopefully take them below 25% to score some points, or make them run away to get even more points, potentially. Or just kill the whole unit. There's only 5 of them, and I've got some good armor bane from the Runesmith, so I could kill the unit. Other than that, there's nothing else I can do, because I've counted up, and I'm definitely not going to be able to hold this river, because I don't have enough Iron Drakes compared to the number of Knights that are on it, so there's no point me even going for it. So all my shooting kills, disappointingly, just 2 Knights of the Realm, and they're going to be fine. So I don't get any more points for that. But in turn 6, my opponent also barely kills anything either, but just consolidates on the river to score the 200 points for that, which means we end up with a draw. So the Baron, getting himself killed and fleeing off the table, cancels out the death of the Gyrocopter, the 2 Grudge Throwers, and the river being held by the Bretonnians. The Doomseekers obviously score nothing, and my opponent did make the choice to attack both of them. So could have potentially avoided them by just turning round and flying off and running away very fast the other way, which may not have been a wise move though. I still think with my Doomseeker build, the best thing to do is just kill them, because if they ever reach you, they will kill you. So you can't afford for that to happen. So you just have to accept you're not scoring the points and just kill them. The one game at this event where someone tried to avoid them, they got their general killed by a Doomseeker, and then got loads of their infantry and cost them the scenario 200 points as well, I think. So you just got to kill them. On the one hand, have I made the Doomseekers too powerful? With all those runes, 300 points between the two of them, over 300 points. Is it too obvious that you should shoot them? Have I not given my opponent anything to think about? It's so obvious you should just kill them because they will kill you. You have to make the Doomseekers kind of middling so that the enemy hesitate and think, well, you know what, they're not that scary, maybe I should avoid them. Even if they reach me, what are they going to do? They're not going to do that much. And that's when they're really dangerous, when the enemy is having second thoughts, so they let them live, and then they do get in and kill something. So maybe I would need to tone down the amount of runes on them, so that I give people a pause for thought, and that would actually free up more points for me to beef up some of the other units as well. Giovanni says, I think they're better playing 50 points. There is definitely some merit to that. There's less risk involved, because there are times where they don't get killed and they give away far less. However, they are also way less of a threat at just 50 points. I could run 3 at 50 points, which are fun as well. They're fun whatever they do, but putting the runes on them just makes them extra scary. So it's a tough choice. I'm going to keep experimenting with them. The Linehammer experiment, I feel like my army can compete with the other armies in games of Warhammer, which is all I ask for with the Dwarves. And I felt like the other more traditional lists I was running with smaller units were not competing, because those units die too easily, enemies just aren't scared of them. Problem with Dwarves, if you make an army that's too good, people can avoid you, like the Wood Elves did, like the Bretonnians did here. I had no way of really closing the distance on them. The only way you can do that is if you run the list like Mr. Dowie After Dark runs, which is where you take the anvil and yeet a Death Star towards the enemy, which I have run similarly before when it was a big unit of hammerers with Ungrim in there, who was just blasted across the table by an anvil, turn 1, right in front of the enemy's face. If you can't deal with them, you lose. If you can deal with them, you win. The Longbeards are core though, which is important, because then you're not using up, or you're not paying a tax basically by having to have a core unit. Which can be Rangers, which are obviously really good as core, but are they as good as Longbeards? Tough to say. I think Rangers are a very strong unit. The one drawback is that even with great weapons, you're only strength 5, which against some armies is great, that's all you need, but against others you do want that little bit of extra strength. I just think this is a good list. I think it's very scary to play against. You see people hesitating to go near the lines, which is good. I think the problem is the Grudge Throwers are a bit unreliable. So people aren't coming towards me, so they're not seeing the Grudge Throwers as a threat. And they're not actually killing enough stuff when they do fire. So if the Grudge Throwers were consistently killing things left and right, the enemy would have to come towards me. But they're not, so they don't. So I need to find some other way of projecting a really long-range threat to force the enemy to engage. Because otherwise, why would they? If you don't give the enemy a compelling reason to attack you, why should they do it? Especially if they've got things like Pillars of Fire or their own artillery that can just whittle things down at range, or even outright kill your own war machines. So I'm going to keep tweaking, try and come up with another way of getting the enemy to attack my lines of doom. Or I could just try and go for the anvil, blast a unit across the table technique. I am potentially going to get Longbeards at some point. I'm in negotiations with someone to maybe buy some 90s metal longbeards, which are the ones I want. I'm not really interested in the current plastic ones, unless I have to. If I've got the choice, I'd rather get the metal ones, just because I like my classic dwarves. I do have some dwarf warriors with great weapons that I haven't added any extra highlights to, because I don't feel a compelling need to use dwarf warriors at the moment. I don't think they're very good as a core. I think they're really bad, actually. I think you're just denying yourself points that you could put into better things by using them as core. So, Dwarf Warrior is not really the way to go, but I could touch up their paintwork and use them as Longbeards, but they're clearly just Dwarf Warriors, so it wouldn't feel good doing it. Still more fun to be had with the Dwarves, though, I think. This event was a lot of fun. The rivers added quite a bit to the games. I didn't mention the special rules that much, because they didn't come up a lot. They mostly come up if you're fighting over the river. You had things like you get extra initiative, you get a ward save if you're in the river. So because I was hanging back away from the rivers mostly, it didn't come up very often. So I don't have much feedback on the special rules that rolled over to a different one in each round. As far as the river being a thing in the middle at all and denying flying over it, I thought was cool. Denying or putting -1 and shooting units over it, I think was nice. That wasn't overpowered because it doesn't stack with other cover, because it just provides cover. So I felt like that was a good choice. I think it maybe benefited my army to some degree in some of the games. It killed a lot of skeletons in the first game, so it definitely helped there. The later games it didn't do a lot. I think the thing is, people mostly bring units that have moved through cover when they see something like that in the event pack. And move through cover makes, in most of the games, you barely suffered any ill effects from going through it. So I think, rather than it being difficult terrain, I think maybe if it had another special rule that couldn't be limited or couldn't be diminished at all with a move through cover ability, because some armies just have loads of access to that and others have none. So I think if we were talking about tweaks for the Riverlands pack, maybe some other rules that are more universal and not just being dangerous terrain. Maybe something specific to the rivers. We're talking about potential other terrain features that could be a theme for events as well, and there are a lot. Any kind of natural feature that could get in the way of a battlefield would be interesting. So time will tell whether the TSN Arena is the place for those events, but this was definitely fun. I would definitely attend another event that's themed around terrain like this. And well done to Rob for getting all those however many feet of rivers painted in a week. Now, you could say that it's his own fault for leaving it so late before he started painting them. I would say that you still have to give him credit for getting it done, even if the pre-planning perhaps wasn't where it should have been. Because they do actually look good. Weirdly, considering they were all painted so quickly, they do look pretty tasty. And they do not stick out as like an eyesore against the other really nice terrain. They just look fine. Especially when you look at how many of them he had to print out and paint. So, good job there. Any other thoughts on the event? There were a lot of dwarves again, but I didn't have to play most of them this time. There weren't... Which armies were not represented at all? I didn't see any Chaos Dwarves, didn't see any Lizard Men, no Tomb Kings. You'd expect to see more Tomb Kings around, since they were one of the launch factions. You'd expect there are plenty of them out there. What else didn't we see? Did we see mostly everything else? We saw quite a few Bretonnian exiles at this event. The problem with Bretonnians at the moment, thematically, is that I think the coolest looking units people don't take because they're not as good. Grail Knights, Questing Knights look so cool, but they're just one wound models that die almost as easily as a Knight of the Realm. So I don't see the big reason for anyone to take them. Now, when I paint my Bretonnians, I will certainly be attempting to field Grail Knights, but maybe they'll have had a tweak by then. I don't see why the most elite cavalry in the game, like Grail Knights, Chaos Knights, Blood Knights, can't have 2 wounds each. I don't think that would be overpowered at all. And I think that would be a necessary change, in fact, to get those cool units on a par with some of the other units in the game that are cheaper, like Knights of the Realm. Well, it's mostly Pegasus Knights you're competing with, really, in Bretonnians, because some people are taking almost nothing but Pegasus Knights at the moment, because they're just so good. They're not actually that great against my Lines of Doom. because they don't have a huge amount of wounds in the unit. They don't like the stand and shoot. They don't like being hit back with great weapons. So I don't mind seeing Pegasus Knights so much. At the last event, my big line of Rangers did a good job on some Pegasus Knights, if you recall. So it's almost time to wrap this video up. Let me know if you've got any last minute comments you want me to reply to. Drop them in now while I'm going through all my social media stuff. So if you think these tournament reports are an invaluable resource for the old world and you would like to see more of them, then why not partially help fund my event tickets and my crippling made-to-order dwarf buying habit by pledging all your life savings via the Patreon or the PayPal links in the description. And if you can't afford your entire life savings, because occasionally you do need to eat and you need like clothes and stuff and maybe heating at this time of year, then I'd settle for a portion instead. Just a tribute. I think that's fair. And why not check out all my various social media shenanigans down there as well. There's Twitter, there's Facebook group, there's Discord server. I'm on Blue Sky now as well as Twitter, so we'll see who wins that war. Time will tell on that one, but I'm on both now. And anything else? Oh yeah, obviously, the winner of the event was Richie again with his dwarves, so well done there, but I do think he is a dwarf anomaly who is maybe going to prevent dwarves from being improved if he keeps being too good at the game, because people will point to him and say, well, if this guy wins with dwarves all the time, they must be amazing. But I think he's just very good at this game, very practiced in the art of the old world, and I don't think is a fair reflection of the difficulties that dwarves have as a faction. I think that's fair. Okay, let's wrap this one up then. So you can have another look at my beautiful thumbnail there. Nice close-up of the Doomseeker. Very enjoyable event. 5 enjoyable games against a variety of different armies. Didn't have to play the same kind of thing over and over again, which you do get at some events. And just a nice, fun day down by the riverside. Occasionally falling into the river and being eaten by a crocodile, being swept away out to sea, and mostly just staying away from the river, shooting people, and having a merry old time. Hashtag Linehammer, hashtag killing the old world, hashtag good night out there, whatever you are.